Chapter 721. Bao asked in bewilderment, wouldn't it be exhausting to learn so much? Yin Yang could not help but chuckle. It's only natural for a superior to know more. Of course, when the time comes, you only need to do one thing. Bao asked, when? Which knowledge? Yin Yang smiled without saying a word. After a while, he said softly, actually, the world is a family. If you want your family not to be bullied, to be fed and clothed, to be free from suffering, you only need one knowledge. If you want everyone in the world to be fed and clothed, you only need one knowledge. Bao seemed to understand, blinking his big eyes in confusion. The two teachers did not comment on Yin Yang's teachings, but they looked like they were listening attentively as well. Hearing Yin Yang's words, however, they were suddenly shaken. Of course, they understood what Yin Yang was saying, but there were some things that they dared not say. He only muttered, one knowledge, one knowledge. I only need one knowledge. They could not help but think. Looking at Yin Yang's gaze, they could not help but feel a little strange. Bao was still too young. Yin Yang had long prohibited him from getting involved in politics. What Yin Yang was doing now, however, was planting seeds in Bao's heart, becoming one with him, waiting for them to sprout and grow. There were some things that they dared not say or could not understand, but Yin Yang's words were enough to make it clear. However, the premise was that those who understood would understand, while those who did not would only walk another path. Could Bao really understand? Looking at Bao's contemplative face, the two teachers could not help chuckling bitterly. Understand? Only now did he realize that as teachers, we really don't even dare to ask the three words, do we understand? Bao, you only need to know that the word home is enough. To an ordinary citizen, home is a family of 3 or 4 people. To a king, what is home? Bao might not have understood this, but the two teachers felt like they had been struck by lightning as they lifted their heads to look at Yin Yang. It was confirmed. Today, Yin Yang was not here to teach Bao, but to teach the two of them as teachers. What is home? The two Confucian scholars suddenly felt a heavy weight on their hearts. Aunt. Seeing that Shangguan Lingxiu had arrived, the other children crowded around her as well, tugging at her hands and complaining, Auntie. What's the use of us learning all that nonsense here? Letting us go back to train is the right thing to do. Staying alive on the battlefield is our top priority. What can these books do? Shangguan Lingxiu was initially all smiles as she watched the learning atmosphere, but her expression darkened when she heard this. Nonsense. What do you mean by a nuisance? Deciding the outcome of a battle from 1,000 miles away is a military principle. Are you really not going to move? If you dare to spout nonsense again, even if your teacher doesn't care about you, you will still be punished according to the family rules. The children immediately hung their heads dejectedly, but no one dared to retort. Family rules? The Shangguan family of generals' discipline was not something an ordinary person could endure. They were all dispirited. Yin Yang could not help but be amused by the situation. He could not blame Shangguan Lingxiu for throwing a tantrum. These young fellows from the Shangguan family were all good fighters. Fighting in a group was like eating honey. They did not slack off even when they were studying military books and scrolls. Only the knowledge in books and the path of the sage had left them numb. During this period of time in the residence of Yun, he had been tormented to the point of whining every day. Even if there was some improvement, the improvement was extremely limited and negligible. They were indeed the children of the Shangguan family of generals, living up to the name, family of generals. There's no rush, there's no rush. Yin Yang comforted her, the heirs of the Shangguan family of generals should have the Shangguan family's nature. The reason I've taken them in here is firstly to learn as much as I can, secondly, to pave a new path for their future. Thirdly, it's to train their temperament. There are actually other reasons, but it will only be beneficial to them. There's no need to be overly concerned about their nature. After all, their positions in the future will be in the board of military or the battlefield. Yin Yang said, Besides, the Shangguan family of generals will have no worries in the future. No worries in the future. Shangguan Lingxiu mumbled the words, unable to hold back a mixture of sadness and joy. No worries in the future. How many years had it been since the Shangguan family of generals had struggled with these words like a nightmare? Now that it had been completely resolved in Yun Yang's hands, they no longer had to worry about the future. It was a permanent solution. Recalling the new path that Yun Yang had mentioned earlier, the Shangguan family of generals might really be able to prosper forever with the foundation that these young fellows had laid here in the residence of Yun. Of course, there was still a precondition: no rebellion. Putting everything else aside, just the childhood friends that the Shangguan family of generals had with Bao would not be a problem. Therefore, Shangguan Lingxiu, who had always shouldered the heavy responsibility of the family of generals, could finally let go of the family's burden. The sudden feeling of relief almost made her cry tears of joy. Among these 6 nephews of yours, only 4 of them can really go to the battlefield in the future. Yin Yang spoke to Shangguan Lingxiu through voice transmission. The other 2 are the ones who play dumb. It's best for them to be in the board of military in the future. You understand. You understand. How could Shangguan Lingxiu not understand? She spoke to Yun Yang through voice transmission, choking with sobs. I understand, I really do. I'm already very content now. But do you know, how I wish that the number you're talking about could be reversed. Yin Yang was speechless. The 3 children of the Shangguan family of generals came forward together, very angry. Auntie, you're crying. Who bullied you? Let's go beat him to death. Another one was hesitant, stopping there and pretending to read a book. The other 2 glanced at each other before lowering their heads to focus on their books. Yin Yang and Shangguan Lingxiu watched closely as the 6 children reacted differently in the face of the sudden incident. They all had different expressions. Yin Yang's expression was one of deep thought. Shangguan Lingxiu was comforted. Only Bao rubbed his palms together and said, "Who dares bully my uncle?" Shangguan Lingxiu rolled her eyes. Bully your uncle? Would the entire continent's population be enough? In the palace, His Majesty had purposely asked Qiu Jianhan to stay after handling the national affairs. Since the Battle of the Fortress of Resilience, Qiu Jianhan had been in a coma. Every time His Majesty wanted to talk to someone to relieve his boredom, he realized in shock that he had no one to keep him around. He had been rather lonely for quite some time. Now that Qiu Jianhan had finally woken up and had fully recovered, the emperor could not help but revert to his usual self amidst his delight. Perhaps, he had summoned old Marshal Qiu more frequently than before, asking him to stay for a chat almost every day after the court session ended. The situation made Qiu Jianhan groan incessantly. Who could stand having to work overtime every day? Others could knock off at the appointed time, but he had to work for a few more hours every day. It did not seem to be a good thing to have too much of the emperor's grace. You often ask for this old man's company, but why don't you give me a higher salary? You're ordering me around for nothing, Qiu Jianhan grumbled inwardly, but his face was serious. What orders does your majesty have? I am strict in everything, and follow the law in everything. I have no mercy. Can the second prince's life be spared? His Majesty was an understanding man, going straight to the point. I'll say a few extra words here. Words from the heart. Country. Family. I've been a soldier, I've been educated, but I don't understand this problem myself. Therefore, this chapter is not a lecture. I think I have 2 points. If the country needs me, I can go to the battlefield and do whatever it takes. If the family needs me, I can do whatever it takes, even if I have to go against everything. Therefore, I'm a little lost when I write this. When my family is bullied, I can do whatever it takes, even if I have to suffer for it. There's no doubt about this. If the country is bullied, I feel that, to a certain extent, I'll give it all. However, when it's not to a certain extent, I might have the thought of peace. However, when I think of it this way, I feel that it doesn't match the theme of this book. Yet, this is my true self. Writing up to this point is also the end of my career's confusion. Therefore, the next book will not be about family and country. Chapter 722. Qiu Jianhan was taken aback, rolling his eyes inwardly. You're asking me about this? How would I know? Besides, what's the use of being strict and impartial? Your Majesty, why do you say so? This old official does not understand Your Majesty's meaning. Please enlighten me, Qiu Jianhan said. Is Supreme Cloud determined to kill him? The emperor asked, is it possible to let him go? Qiu Jianhan's forehead was sweating. How would this old official know? Ask for me, the emperor said without hesitation. Qiu Jianhan was stunned. This old official, where should I ask? Ask for you? Who can help me ask then? Don't you know that Supreme Cloud has always been elusive? Only he can find someone. Who can find him? The emperor said, this is settled then. Go and ask. Oh well, second has given up everything, he has nothing left. Why must he be so ruthless? No matter what, he is still my blood. Qiu Jianhan wanted to say more, but His Majesty had already asked him to leave. Go, go. I know you have a way. I believe in you. Qiu Jianhan left the palace gate in bewilderment. This matter. How should he explain it? Although it was not common for an emperor to encounter unreasonable officials, it was still a common occurrence. For example, Emperor of Yutang's three most trusted officials, Qiu Jianhan, Ling Daoyin, and Fang Qingtian, were all shrewd with age and eventually became the perfect example of rogues. Therefore, the Emperor of Yutang had a way to deal with rogues. Furthermore, he had even more ways to deal with other rogues. What was the most effective way to deal with rogues? Rogues usually had the upper hand, but when rogues met rogues, it was a matter of who was more roguish. His Majesty was saying, I don't want to be reasonable, so what if I don't want to be reasonable? Qiu Jianhan was very, very tired mentally. As the saying went, a hero's background was not important, while a roguish's age was not important. Now, Qiu Jianhan really wanted to say that a roguish background was not important at all. What should a courtier do when encountering an unreasonable and hooligan emperor? Sigh, Qiu Jianhan truly felt as if he had aged decades in this afternoon. He sighed endlessly when he got home, feeling helpless and helpless. Old gangster Qiu was truly at a loss. He wanted to give in and compromise, but could he really ask? That was clearly impossible. At such a delicate time, he believed that the emperor had long since paid attention to his every move. Even if he went to the toilet to take a bath or change his clothes, he would still be closely watched. If he were to look for Yun Yang now, the only outcome would be to expose Yun Yang. There was no such thing as a fluke. If Supreme Cloud's identity was exposed, Qiu Jianhan dared not imagine what would happen next. Therefore, when he returned home, other than sighing and feeling helpless, he did not do anything else. Then, he sighed inwardly. Once it came to the matter of his own bloodline, even the wisest emperor would be blinded by a leaf. Did the Emperor of Yutang really not know the possible consequences of exposing Supreme Cloud's identity? He obviously knew, but he still chose to force himself to think of a solution. He was still willing to believe that Supreme Cloud had the ability to deal with any crisis. Currently, his priority was to save his son's life, even if his son was not worth saving. As a ruler, as a parent, there were many things that one could not help but be selfish, even when they knew the truth. Old gangster Qiu, as a subject, understood this, but he could only sigh helplessly. Compared to old Marshal Qiu's helplessness, this period of time was a rare period of relaxation for Yun Yang. After the incident, everything had been settled. For a time, there was nothing to worry about. His country was at peace, and he was at ease. Therefore, he was left to polish his martial arts skills in the residence of Yun. It had become a routine for him to spar with Ji Lingxi every day, at least 3 to 5 times a day. Although Yin Yang's cultivation base was improving with each passing day, the endless divine art was progressing steadily, and he had Emmy's return as well as the help of his cheat, it was still insignificant compared to Ji Lingxi's improvement. Ji Lingxi did not even need to use the red light shield now. She could beat Yun Yang into submission with her own cultivation base alone. In spite of this, Yun Yang was not discouraged. He would rest and recuperate immediately when he was defeated, studying his techniques in between. When he had recovered and felt that he had improved, he would fight Ji Lingxi again. Ji Lingxi did not have much interest in such a contest in the beginning. After all, there was a great disparity between them. Her cultivation base had truly improved by leaps and bounds. No matter how flawless Yun Yang's techniques were, it was difficult for him to escape defeat when faced with an unparalleled force that was difficult to defend against. However, as they fought, she grew more and more spirited. After all, Ji Lingxi's cultivation base was growing too rapidly. Her state of mind, especially in actual combat, was far from being able to match it. Although Yin Yang's attack was weak, his recovery ability was astounding. He was the perfect sparring partner for Ji Lingxi to completely absorb the sudden increase in cultivation base and use it for her own. In addition, Ji Lingxi also wanted to see how long her strange method of cultivation base growth would last and how far it would go before it was complete. Now, Ji Lingxi could feel that her current cultivation base had very likely surpassed the level of Dao realm. As for the known cultivation realm in this world, it only stopped at the 9th tier of Dao realm. However, this knowledge was still not enough. Even though she had obviously surpassed the limits of this world, how could she confirm and proceed to the next step? What was the specific realm? There was no way forward. Ji Lingxi did not know anything about this, neither did Yun Yang. In fact, no one in the residence of Yun knew. Yun Xiaoyao, Lao Mei, Fang Mafei, none of them knew. Yin Yang had asked the 10 kings of the Yama underworld about this, but it was a pity that the 10 Yama kings were clueless about it as well. Instead, they had promised to ask on their master's behalf when he came out of his closed-door cultivation. Such a high-end question could only be answered clearly by those seniors and experts who were above the pinnacle. Yin Yang did not mind. After all, he had always thought that Ling Xiaozui and the rest would be back in a few days anyway. They should know about the level above Dao realm. If such a thing were to happen, perhaps it was the first time it had happened in this world. She had broken through the highest level that a cultivator could reach in this world, yet she did not know where she should go on the road ahead. That was not right. Although Ji Lingxi did not know the name of the road ahead, nor did she know where it led to, she was still walking on this path resolutely. She should be striding forward at an extremely high speed. Such a cultivation method was not intoxicating, but rather intoxicating. Chapter 723. Yin Yang was not someone who would always be abused. Although he was destined to be unable to do anything to Ji Lingxi in the short term, he could still do it to others. When the beatings were too much for him, he would find a softer way to retaliate. First, it was Dong Tianlong and the other 3 young masters, along with all of their guards, who ganged up on Yin Yang. However, this formation had only lasted for a day before the 4 of them hung up the no challenge sign and played dead on their beds. I can't take this abuse anymore. Yin Yang's words of, "You're all going to do great things with me in the future, how can you be so lazy? Get up," were met with a snort of contempt from the 4 noble young masters, completely ignoring him. We've never had such great ambitions. From the very beginning, we've been most interested in eating and waiting to die in this world. To be able to level up happily and comfortably has already exceeded the limits of our greatest pursuit. Popinjays? What's so bad about popinjays? Looking at the world's popinjays, who else dares to say they're on par with the 4 of us other than you, boss? We're content, we're always happy. Boss, please spare us. We're really not made of that pinnacle material. Yun Yang was speechless and helpless in the face of the 4 young masters' tearful pleas and professional behavior of playing dead. Faced with such unmotivated fellows, Yun Yang was helpless even if he had 1,000 tricks up his sleeves. Are you all bragging when you say you're going to do great things with me? We do want to do great things, but there are prerequisites. The degree of hardship has to be within the limits of what we can handle. The fortress of resilience has already used up all of our ambition, loyalty, and spirit. Our future endeavors have to be built on something that isn't hard at all. It would be best if we could still live comfortably. Yes, it would be best if we could live comfortably and be envied by others while accomplishing a great undertaking that others can only look up to. Faced with such arguments, Yunyang had to suppress his urge to kill several times before he could do so. In fact, the four of them did not dare to say something directly. Even if we need to train to become strong, we can do it step by step. We don't want to become fat in one bite, and we refuse to be abused. Big brother, your strength is so much higher than ours. You want to spar with us, but in fact, you want to vent your frustrations. Do you think we don't know that? Do you really think we are stupid? You seem to be addicted to getting beaten up every day, but we don't have that kind of addiction. Besides, you were hit by a beauty, but we were hit by you. We are not masochists, and we will definitely not be your target for venting. Yin Yang did not have a suitable outlet to vent his frustrations when these fellows refused to cooperate. Helpless, he began to train his spiritual beasts instead. Thus, the 5 whiteys became his punching bags. Where's your monkey? Yin Yang's sudden question stunned Ji Lingxi. Ji Lingxi's beloved pet, the 1000 illusion monkey, was a solid 8th level mystical beast, only slightly lower than the eclipse panther. However, the 1000 illusion monkey was a spiritual species of heaven and earth, so its chances of leveling up were higher than the eclipse panthers. If the two were in the same level, the former's power would be a notch higher, especially the 1000 illusion monkey's unique gift of being able to transform into a myriad of forms. Didn't I tell you? Ji Lingxi said, I sent the monkey out to look for something. Only the monkey can find something like this. Look for something? What is it? Yin Yang frowned. Oh, it's the beauty herb. Cough, one of the main ingredients of the exquisite monkey wine. Ji Lingxi's words were evasive, and her subsequent explanation was obviously an attempt to cover things up. Beauty herb. Yin Yang chuckled strangely. Ji Lingxi's embarrassment turned into anger. What are you laughing at? Are you itching again? Nothing, nothing. Yin Yang kept his mouth shut tactfully. Yin Yang did not know if the beauty herb was the main ingredient of the monkey wine, but he did know that the beauty herb had another effect. It could wash away the disguise that had been applied to one's face. It was obvious that Ji Lingxi was trying to remove the layer of ointment that he had applied on her. The reason she had used the ointment to disguise herself that day was mainly because of the threat from Lei Dongtian. However, with Ji Lingxi's current cultivation base and ability, dealing with Lei Dongtian would be like playing a game to her. She could kill him with a wave of her hand, so there was no need for her to worry anymore. There was no longer a need for the disguise ointment to exist. The ointment's effective time is coming to an end. It'll disappear in a few months at most. Why waste time looking for the beauty herb? Yin Yang's EQ was too low, so he spoke his mind. Ji Lingxi was enraged at once and sparred with Yin Yang again. Shangguan Lingxiu, who was standing on the side, burst out laughing. She finally felt that Yin Yang did not understand his daughter's thoughts at all. His EQ was so low that it was insanely low. It was obvious that Ji Lingxi wanted to restore her original appearance as soon as possible, but what was the point of restoring her original appearance? As the saying went, a man would die for his bosom friend while a woman would dress up for the man who loved her. Ji Lingxi wanted to restore her beauty as soon as possible, so of course, she wanted to show it to Yin Yang. However, not only did this fellow not appreciate her kindness, he had even exposed her daughter's thoughts in front of everyone. It was intolerable, unbearable. If you don't get beaten up, who will? Shangguan Lingxiu was delighted. Today, Yin Yang seemed to have decided on one thing, to poke at her sore spot. Then, what about your little wolf? Ji Lingxi's expression darkened, her eyes rimmed with tears. He was beaten to death by Lei Dongtian the last time. Yin Yang's expression darkened as well. Hearing Lei Dongtian's name again, Yin Yang could not help but sigh. King waited for you to send resources, medicinal herbs, medicinal pills, and medicine over. Why did this fellow disappear just like that? Did he say he was here for revenge? Ever since he left here the last time, he had disappeared without a trace like a bird killing a rabbit. Could he have died on the way? Yin Yang mumbled. Compared to Tiantang City's peace and tranquility, the turbulence in the martial world was still unfolding. Starting from Tiantang City, it extended to all corners of the martial world. It was another tens of thousands of miles of pursuit. When Yin Yang had tossed the 2 pieces of treasure map, they had curled up into a ball. Therefore, during this period of time, no matter whose hands they ended up in, they were still intact. No one was foolish enough to separate them after obtaining them. Within this short period of time, the 2 pieces of treasure map had changed hands dozens of times. Along the way, countless mountains along the way had been smashed to pieces. Countless martial world people had participated in this battle. The sea of people fought from the south to the north, then from the north to the south. It was a frenzied battle. Chapter 724. Watching as more and more people died in the fight for the treasure maps and the scale of the fight grew more and more terrifying, the 10 kings were increasingly shaken. When would this martial world catastrophe that started in Tiantang City end? Towards the end, he saw some experts who were not weaker than him jump out one by one, and then die a violent death. He saw some bold and skillful experts risk their lives to snatch the treasure map, but they were immediately blocked by others, surrounded, beaten up, and madly slaughtered. Putting themselves in their shoes, the 10 Yama kings felt a chill rising from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. This is a catastrophe that has never been seen before. King Chujiang's eyebrows were twitching, his facial muscles twitching unconsciously. Perhaps, this is a martial world catastrophe that is rarely seen in 100,000 years. Even in the legends, I've never heard of a catastrophe of such a scale. Be it the number of people involved, the range of coverage, or the number of deaths, it's unprecedented. After this war, the entire martial world will be peaceful for many, many years. That's right. The number of top-notch experts in this world will be reduced by at least a third, maybe even more. The 10 kings could all see this, but they could do nothing about the current situation, and there was nothing they could do. Not only could they not stop it, they had to add fuel to the fire. Moreover, it was absolutely impossible even if a deity came out to stop the war now. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot. What good does this martial world catastrophe bring to Yun Yang if it continues? Why did he deliberately set up this trap? The 2 dragonhide treasure maps are the real deal. First Court King Qingguang asked. Only with effort will there be returns. The benefits that Yun Yang can reap are endless. At least to him, the price of the dragonhide treasure maps is worth it. In fact, it's far more than that. Emperor Song sighed with melancholy. Now that the continent's struggle for hegemony has basically come to an end, Yutang's dominance is already a foregone conclusion. As long as we annex the other countries according to the sequence, we can completely unify the continent and pacify Tianxian. If there is any force in this world that can interfere with or even reverse this trend at this critical moment, it can only be the forces of the Jianghu. Whether it is to assassinate a general amidst an army of 10,000, or to gather a large number of powerful men to face them head-on, the people of the martial world are an unstable factor for Yutang to unify the world. Do you know what kind of benefits the other empires other than Yutang can offer in exchange for the intervention of the martial world forces when it comes to a critical juncture? For a country that was about to perish, what price couldn't they pay? On the other hand, no matter how amazing a person is, there will always be a price that can be bought. At the last moment, the higher-ups of the various countries will definitely think of this method to reverse the situation. And before the war to unify the world begins, I'll first stir up a calamity in the world of martial artists that is sufficiently shocking, enticing, and influential. I'll use it to greatly injure the martial artists. It might be a little cruel, but it's a great move. Yin Yang's initial plan was to eliminate the biggest threat, the assassin organization that only cared about money and not people. It was even better. More than 100,000 famous assassins were destroyed in a day. It could be said that half of the threat from the martial world forces had been removed. Assassins have always been the greatest taboo in an army of 10,000. Up until today, the martial world's people are still fighting one another. The more they fight, the more their strength is damaged. Then, they will have less and less ability to participate in the war to unify the world. I think that when this calamity ends and the whereabouts of the 2 Dragonhide treasure maps are completely unknown, the survivors will not only have to worry about their enemies coming for revenge, but they will also have to spend a lot of energy to settle down their families, heal their wounds, and improve their skills. I'm afraid they won't have the mood to participate in the war to unify the world. Other than that, there's another advantage to Yun Yang's plan. After the battle in Tiantang City, the entire martial world will owe Yutang officials a favor. As long as this favor remains, when the martial world's calamity ends, Yutang will be able to arrange the follow-up and come up with any corresponding strategies without worrying about interference from the martial world forces. This is a calamity that has the martial world's forces down to their very bones. Whether it's the start, the reason, the juncture, the time, or even the diversion of the calamity in the diversion of the tiger from the mountain, everything has been arranged perfectly and seamlessly. Emperor Song heaved a long sigh. Young Master Yun Yang is indeed a genius of his generation. He has foresight and is meticulous at every step. I'm not nearly as good as he is. First Court King Qingguang could not help feeling dissatisfied and confused by Emperor Song's words. He said, "Everyone knows that young Master Yun has a good mind, but he can't be as good as you say, can he? Your brain is widely acknowledged as the best among us brothers. If you're not nearly as good as him, wouldn't we not dare to talk to him?" Emperor Song glanced at his brother mockingly and said, "Have you forgotten who Yun Yang is? Other than being Supreme Cloud, he's also Supreme Wit, the Supreme Wit of the 9 Supremes. Do you know how he grasped the opportunity in this situation? How much benefit has Yutang gained from this incident? You can't even think about it, yet you're still trying to compare yourself to him. You're right about one thing. All of you should really talk to him less in the future, or else you'll have to bargain for him on your own accord when he buys all of you over." The other kings were puzzled. "Oh well, third, we all know that we're not as good as you. Can you please explain in detail? Is that Supreme Cloud really as sharp as you've said?" Emperor Song snorted and rolled his eyes, saying, "Let's start from the beginning. Actually, from the moment Dong Tianlang revealed this, I've already told all of you that this was 99% of Yun Yang's setup and manipulation. It's just that even I didn't see it too far back then. At most, it was because of the importance of the Dragonhide treasure map that I connected it to Yun Yang's plot. What he's plotting is not trivial. It's only now that I've come to this that I can fully understand the whole story. The starting point of Yun Yang's plot was to borrow Dong Tianlang's hand, using his popinjay appearance to toss out the Dragonhide treasure map flawlessly. The 4 popinjays completed this foreplay with their exquisite performance and stayed out of the matter as victims. This is also the fundamental reason why the 4 young masters who started it all remained unscathed when the entire martial world was torn apart, with ghosts weeping and deities grieving. It's always been said that the best liar can win people's trust with 9 truths and 1 lie. However, Yin Yang's plot can be seen through at a glance, but can you not jump into it? That's the 17th master of the Abyss's legacy map. Don't you think it's amazing just because of this? Can you take it if it were you? And this time, we're directly solving the national crisis. Not to mention, he even schemed to kill his greatest personal enemy, Ouyang Shaoxi, in this incident. He has laid out layers upon layers of schemes, and every step he takes is alarming. From what I can see, Yun Yang has considered every aspect when he set up this game. He has grasped every possible change within his grasp. Even our concourse of the underworld is within his plans. Why are we within his plans too? What does this mean? Could he have schemed against us? We're allies with him. If he schemed against us, it would be his fault. The hot-tempered king of Chakravarti grumbled. Sigh, honestly, Yun Yang can't be blamed for this scheme. We're considered an unexpected variable in this battle, but it's also the biggest variable. Because we're strong enough, the chances of us obtaining the Dragonhide treasure map will be difficult to match once we join forces. Of course, the most important thing is that we don't care about the Dragonhide treasure map. Even if we have the chance to obtain it, we'll still hand it over to Yun Yang eventually. There's a high chance that Yun Yang has considered and arranged this from the beginning. Otherwise, why would he promise us a chance to leap forward when the matter is over? This proves that he has long discovered a place similar to a Yin Qi palace, a place with unusually dense Yin Qi. He has indeed chosen the most suitable time to release us. He has allowed us to do the dirty work and attract all the subsequent attention, but there's only admiration and not the slightest bit of hatred. Furthermore, we can continue to work together in the future, and our relationship might even grow closer. Because we each take what we need, the benefits are great. Emperor Song chuckled. Looking at it now, can you all see it? Now, the martial world is at peace, the imperial court is stable, there's nothing to worry about, the military and government are united. There are no traitors within, no strong enemies outside. The army is strong, the steeds are strong, and the generals are as numerous as the clouds. In addition, even the hidden threat of the fight for the throne has been eliminated. If Yutang still can't unify Tianxian, it'll be the strangest thing in the world. Come to think of it, the price that young Master Yun paid for this setup was ultimately those 2 maps. Moreover, he had taken a stroll in the martial world and returned them to his hands unscathed in the end. It was truly a great profit without any capital. Such calculation, such strategy, to have all the heroes in the world in the palm of his hand, how terrifying is that? Emperor Song let out a heartfelt sigh of admiration. King Qingguang shook his head and said, "Admire later. How can you be sure that these 2 maps were taken by young Master Yun? Also, how can you tell that we'll definitely be able to take these 2 maps back?" Emperor Song looked at his brother like he was looking at an idiot. The other kings also looked at him like they were looking at an idiot. They sighed at the same time. I have nothing to say to someone with your level of IQ. The average IQ of the Yama kings of the 10 halls was pulled down by someone. The one who said this was the king of equality. His face was filled with a sense of superiority. There's no doubt about this. My foolish brother, stop asking questions, it's embarrassing. King Chujiang sighed. What are the kings of the concourse of the underworld best at? It's none other than concealing our tracks. This fight is finally coming to an end. As long as no powerful figure appears, this treasure map will be ours for sure. Everything is just waiting for us to enter the battle. I can say with certainty that those who can make the final decision are now restrained by each other and are destined to miss this battle. There's no doubt about it. Emperor Song said decisively, we'll make our move tomorrow and take the treasure map back. We'll end this scheme once and for all. The others nodded in agreement. They all looked impatient. Yin Yang was in a hurry to retrieve the treasure map, but they were also in a hurry to improve their abilities. First Court King Qingguang scratched his head and said, I see. He was also in a hurry to retrieve the treasure map and obtain the opportunity to improve his ability that Yun Yang had promised. As he thought about it, he understood what was meant by no doubt. He was already in such a hurry, what else could he do? Although Yun Yang had put it nicely, the item was in his hands. If he said he would not give it to him, what could he do? If he could not retrieve the treasure map, why would he need the opportunity Yun Yang had given him? This was a simple and obvious matter that would benefit both parties. At this moment, the few fellows who could make the final decision that Emperor Song had mentioned were in a sorry state, but they were indeed destined to miss this battle. Yun Yang's calculations were correct. Chapter 726. Now, Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou, the 2 bosses, were truly frustrated. Logically, based on their own judgment, the combination of the 4 of them was already the strongest team in the world. Be it in terms of wits or strength, they were invincible, let alone someone who dared to cause them trouble. Their team consisted of the current unrivaled expert, Ling Xiaozui, the former unrivaled expert, Du Guchou, Heaven's Inquisition, who knew yin and yang and could predict the future, and the weakest of them all was the legendary god of wine, an unparalleled expert with a pinnacle cultivation base, Feng Xiang'e. Whether it was in theory or in reality, the team of these 4 people could be said to be invincible anywhere in this world. In spite of this, the reality was that their journey had not been peaceful at all. After a period of recuperation, the 4 of them, who had recovered from their injuries, walked out of the mountain. Feng Xiang'e expressed his indignation and suggested to find a way to cause trouble for the 4 Seasons Tower again, to catch them off guard and catch them off guard. No matter how bad the outcome of the previous battle had been, it was confirmed that the 4 Seasons Tower's headquarters was in the mountain. Now that everyone had recovered from their injuries, why not return the favor? The reason they had been tricked the last time was because they had not been aware of the ambush. Now that everyone was on guard, how could they be ambushed again? When he made his move this time, he was planning to catch the enemy off guard. He should have succeeded in one strike, and it was flawless. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou thought that Feng Xiang'e's suggestion was reasonable. In particular, Ling Xiaozui had another concern in his heart. Honestly speaking, it was the most appropriate thing for them to go back and look for Yun Yang to discuss their next move. However, based on the various assessments, there had to be a problem among the 4 of them. If they could not find this person and brought him back hastily, it might lead to a greater disaster. On the other hand, if they were to attack the 4 Seasons Tower again, regardless of whether there was a trap or an ambush, they would be more certain of their own people after experiencing it. It was better to clear their surroundings and return only after they had come to a conclusion, in order to avoid any lurking dangers. If he and Du Guchou, 2 top-notch experts, had actually done something that they were unaware of, they would become the biggest joke in the martial world. Not only would they be a laughingstock, they would be shameful for all eternity. But at the end of the day, they couldn't afford to lose. There was something wrong with his mentality. The more he couldn't afford to offend these 4 people, the more he didn't want to be at a disadvantage. Why? I'm so awesome, but I'm losing here. Thus, in the end, the 3 of them agreed to this suggestion. Gu Chaoyang, on the other hand, was the only one who objected to the suggestion firmly. He declared, this trip is fraught with danger. Not only is there a bloodbath, but there's also the danger of a trapped dragon. Repent and you'll be saved, you'll lose if you advance rashly. It was an unprecedentedly firm objection. However, Du Guchou was already suspicious of him. Why would he listen to him? At the same time, Ling Xiaozui wanted to confirm something as well. In addition to Feng Xiang'e's incitement, there was no way Gu Chaoyang could overturn the idea of a counterattack no matter how insistent he was. If he said a few more words now, the 4 of them might start fighting on the spot, and he would be the target of all. The other 3 would definitely attack him together, and the only result would be him being beaten flat. That would be a great injustice. He had no choice but to reluctantly agree. Therefore, on the same night, the 4 of them crept up the target mountain again to explore the 4 Seasons Tower. The mountain where the 4 Seasons Tower's headquarters was located was extremely steep. The highest point of the main peak in the middle was so high that it reached the sky. A conservative estimate would be about 10,000 feet tall, surrounded by cliffs. The entire peak was like a brush holder. In fact, the peak's name was Brush Holder Peak. Feng Xiang'e pointed at the Brush Holder Peak from afar and explained rather proudly, see that? Only when you enter this area can you see this mountain that's like a brush holder. The last time we were ambushed, it was in the wide area under the brush holder. This time, we've crept up the Brush Holder Peak, coming out of the blue and taking their headquarters by surprise. Even if they're on guard, will they be able to defend themselves against this? Feng Xiang'e's plan could be said to be extremely bold, but it had its own unique and unexpected aspects. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou pondered for a moment, feeling that the plan was feasible and had a high success rate. No matter what, with the combined combat power of the 4 of them, even if there were any accidents, it would be difficult to stop them if they only wanted to flee when things went south. No matter how strong the other party was, it would not be difficult for them to retreat unscathed. I'm already half a step into my coffin. I don't want to leave an obsession in my heart that will linger in my death. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou nodded in agreement to Feng Xiang's words. Gu Chaoyang's opinion, the only one who disagreed, was meaningless. In spite of this, Gu Chaoyang still insisted on one condition: it was fine to go up and fight. However, they had to plan out their strategy and retreat beforehand. Not to mention anything else, Brushholder Peak was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Although everyone's skills were superb and they would not be bothered by the hindrance, there was still a limit to one's strength. The martial world had countless tricks up its sleeves, and it was impossible to guard against them. Therefore, there had to be a certain level of safety measures. For example, it was not enough to prepare healing medicine. They could hide it in their mouths and swallow it when they needed it. Based on the terrain, they could make a few kites that could glide high up in the sky just in case. Could they guarantee that they would not fall into some kind of trap that prevented them from gathering mystical qi? In addition, their bodies had to be prepared as well. As for the antidote, they might as well consume it beforehand to defend against poison. If there was nothing else, they could just treat it as medicine. It was better to be prepared and avoid the risk. Gu Chaoyang's series of requests annoyed Du Guchou to no end, but Gu Chaoyang was insistent on it. My request is the biggest consideration for the implementation of safety. It's for everyone's good. If you have any objections, why don't you do as I say? All right, then forgive me for not accompanying you. The three of you can go play yourselves. The three of them thought about it and realized that Gu Chaoyang was indeed doing it out of kindness. The capability that the Four Seasons Tower had displayed earlier was indeed astounding, far above their own. It was not excessive to be cautious, so they did as they were told. Then, the four of them charged forward. However, what they did not expect was that they were ambushed once again as they charged forward. When the four of them set foot on Brushholder Peak, their powerful deific consciousness quickly realized that there was no one on the peak. When they carefully snuck into the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters, there was still no sign of anyone in the only building on the peak. How could the four of them not know that something was amiss when they saw the situation? They wanted to pull themselves away, but it was too late. A super explosion that they had never seen before erupted. With a loud boom, the entire towering peak that was tens of thousands of feet tall turned into rubble and debris in an instant. The Four Seasons Tower had buried an unknown amount of explosives under Brushholder Peak. They were detonated at the right time, resulting in such an earth-shattering explosion. Today is the last night watch. Tomorrow, I'll go to Jinan for a meeting. During this period of time, the incident was only one of the aspects. Actually, I've been thinking about something. The plot in Tianxian continent had basically ended, and we were about to enter the Bound of Universe. The Bound of Universe was the last segment of the book. The setting and plot needed to be considered. However, this was not the main reason. The main reason was that the intention was wrong. Before writing this book, the intention was to create the country and the world. Then, the more he wrote, the more confused he became. He had put in 1,000 times the effort to write, only to realize that there were two extremes, those that he liked, and those that he loved to death. Those that he did not like, he would not even look at. Chapter 727. It was fortunate that Gu Chaoyang had vetoed Feng Xiang's suggestion to split up when they were ascending the peak. The four of them were gathered in one spot. The highest point of the peak was near, and the explosion was triggered from below. The moment the explosion detonated, the four of them had already flown up to avoid the direct impact of the explosion. Otherwise, despite their profound cultivation base and strong cultivation base, they would have perished here and gone to the underworld together. However, even if the four of them reacted quickly and avoided the direct impact of the huge explosion, the four of them who had to bear the impact of the aftermath of the violent explosion couldn't help but be seriously injured. The four experts hadn't even exchanged blows with the enemy, but their combat strength had already been depleted, and their condition was greatly ruined. The force of the explosion that could destroy an entire mountain in an instant was enough to annihilate any expert in this world. Even those as strong as Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou were no exception. After a while, the shockwave from the core of the explosion gradually subsided, but the rumbling continued to resound. Many peaks were still shaking and collapsing from the aftershock. The accumulated snow on the mountain peaks that had not melted for tens of thousands of years had fallen from the clouds, turning into a massive avalanche that should never have appeared. The mountains and plains were covered with ditches and rivers. For a time, there was no other sound between heaven and earth, apart from the loud rumbling sounds. After a long, long time, the land that had been bustling for a long time finally began to calm down. However, the surrounding peaks that had radiated out were still trembling incessantly. Amidst the white snow, there was a sudden explosion. A silhouette in green shot out from within. It was Ling Xiaozui. Ling Xiaozui was indeed the unrivaled expert in the world. He could still maintain his composure even in the face of such a terrible situation, waiting for a chance to escape. It was impressive indeed. However, he was not in a good state right now. At least, his external appearance was not optimistic. He was limping, his green robe stained with blood, and there was a large dark stain on his chest. It was the blood he had spat out from the intense tremor. His face was bruised and his hair was messy, his eyes were filled with rage. As soon as he came out, he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately looked around to make sure his surroundings were safe. Then he took a deep breath and began to circulate his energy. After a while, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion recovered a bit, and then he let out a long sigh. His combat strength, compared to normal, was only 10% to 20%. In other words, this was the most dangerous moment in Ling Xiaozui's life. Ling Xiaozui forced himself to calm down and began to search for traces of the other three. Trapped in such a powerful explosion, would they still have a chance to survive? Just then, there was another sound in the snow. It was Duga Chao's head popping out before he leaped out of the snow. Duga Chao's condition was similar to Ling Xiaozui's. He was panting heavily and vomiting blood. Suddenly, he shook his head and moaned in agony, closing his eyes and opening them again. Only then did he focus his gaze on Ling Xiaozui. "How are you feeling now? What about the other two?" Ling Xiaozui shook his head and said while panting, "Not yet. They might be buried underneath, but we might have to recuperate first before we can talk about finding them." Ling Xiaozui could already see that Duga Chao's condition was no better than his own. His cultivation base had dropped to 80 to 90%. If he were to search for them directly, he might die of exhaustion before he could find them. Duga Chao chuckled and said self-deprecatingly, "It's all thanks to Gu Chaoyang this time." The bloody disaster he spoke of actually came true. This old man was forced by him to wear the ice silkworm robe and put on an additional layer of flood dragon skin to protect my heart. I've also swallowed a few spiritual pills early on. All of them have been extremely effective. Otherwise, even if I had the mystical beast skin kite as support to charge out when the explosion came, I might still have been injured and exhausted. Now that I think about it, if it wasn't for his insistent reminder, I might really have died here this time. Ling Xiaozui chuckled bitterly as well. My situation is similar. It's just that I've lost one of my legs to the boulders. Sigh. The two peerless experts exchanged a bitter smile. A broken leg from a boulder would have been understandable if it had happened to an ordinary person, but it was a joke when it happened to Ling Xiaozui. Ling Xiaozui's leg would probably not even budge even if an expert were to smash it with a sledgehammer. Now, however, it had been broken by the boulder. Since the other party can predict the timing of our attack so precisely, I don't think there's much time left for us. We must recover immediately and try to find the both of them. I think the Four Seasons Tower's men will be here to search for them in less than a quarter of an hour. That's right, that's right. After a short moment, the two of them recovered slightly, and then they started the search and rescue work. Although the two of them were injured and exhausted, the damage to their divine sense wasn't serious. Once their powerful divine sense spread out, it instantly enveloped an area of 50 kilometers, and they quickly discovered two weak auras of life. You take the left, I'll take the right. Get away quickly after we save them. Upon Ling Xiaozui's command, both of them sprang into action without another word. By the time Ling Xiaozui had dug Gu Chaoyang out from the pile of boulders that was 1,000 feet underground, De Gu Chou had just dug Feng Xiang out as well. Both of them still have a breath left in them. Ling Xiaozui grinned. Gu Chaoyang's internal organs are damaged, his internal organs are fried. There are 7 to 8 holes in his head alone. He's dying from his injuries. De Gu Chou coughed and said, Feng Xiang is about the same. His last bit of inner breath is faintly discernible. Both of them are at the gates of the King of Hell, just one last step away. Let's go. It's more important to leave this place as soon as possible. Ling Xiaozui flew up first while De Gu Chou followed closely behind, sprinting at full speed. Although both of them were moving fast, their speed had slowed down a few times compared to before. A few silhouettes were already whistling and flying over from a distance away. Kill Ling Xiaozui and capture De Gu Chou alive. Let's go. The two unrivaled experts could not help feeling aggrieved. They had never been so aggrieved in their entire lives. Now, they had been aggrieved twice in 4 days. The second time, in particular, was like a dragon trapped in a shallow pond, a tiger out of the plains. Looking from afar, one could see the bigger picture from the slightest clue. The newcomers' abilities were not to be underestimated, but they might not have been able to catch their attention. At least, they did not have to be chased by others. They had never been so flustered before. As they ran, the two of them could not help but think of a saying, busy like stray dogs, anxious like fish that had escaped the net. They could not help sighing. Chapter 728. Both of them panted as they sprinted, using the mystical qi that they had just recovered to get rid of the smell of the explosion and the stench of blood on them. Both of them knew that although they were slower now, they were a step ahead after all. As long as they avoided them appropriately, they were confident that they could shake off their pursuers. However, the fatal problem now was the aura that their pursuers had sensed. If they did not get rid of these auras, they would die today. After a long while, whether it was a coincidence or not, whether it was by chance or by necessity, both of them arrived at the edge of the cliff and jumped off without hesitation. Was this an accident or not? While jumping, the two of them instinctively felt a strange feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. F***ck, who the hell was their father? Was he the unrivaled expert who was sought after by others or a young man who had just come out of the martial world? He had been chased to jump off a cliff twice in just 4 days. Don't novels always say that cliffs are places of opportunity? Does this also apply to us now? What was different from the previous time was that the Four Seasons Tower's men did not retreat this time. Instead, they launched an unusually strict search, looking like they were going to kill all 4 of them. Below them, Ling Xiaozui and De Gu Chou finally found a hidden spot after much effort. Then, Ling Xiaozui dragged his broken leg and began to set up illusory formations. After setting up 3 illusory formations consecutively, both of them brought Feng Xiang and Gu Chaoyang along and found a more secluded corner. They dug a hole on the flat ground and lifted up the surface above. The 4 of them went in to hide and moved the surface back to its original position. Not long after the 4 of them had hidden themselves, they heard swishing sounds coming from outside. The pursuers had arrived. There's something wrong with the terrain here. There's a formation. Break the formation. There's no one. So, it's to confuse us. The formation is set up to confuse us. Search again. There's another formation here. Look. There's no one in the formation. It's also to confuse us. This is the 3rd formation. Yes. The unrivaled expert is indeed the unrivaled expert. The 3 illusory formations have taken us an hour. With their speed, they probably won't be able to catch up. Let's go back. Brothers, gather up and listen to the boss's command. This time, I can't let those 2 get away no matter what. When I catch up to them, I'll F***ck them up. Ling Xiaozui and Ling Xiaozui laid there quietly, their breathing paused, only exhaling once in a while. Ling Xiaozui's hand was still pressed against Gu Chaoyang's back, channeling mystical qi continuously to prolong Gu Chaoyang's life. It was the same for Du Guchou. Even though they heard that there were no longer any movements outside, the two of them still did not move. They remained motionless for an entire day and night before they carefully climbed out with their men. We can't go on like this. We have to find a safe place to save them. They won't be able to hold on much longer. Another day later, Gu Chaoyang, who had been treated, slowly woke up. Just as he opened his eyes, he saw two faces above his head, watching him open his eyes with awkward smiles written all over them. Sigh, Gu Chaoyang rolled his eyes. Before he could even circulate his energy to recuperate, he began to complain directly. What did I say? Something was wrong, wasn't it? There was a bloodbath, wasn't there? Some of them refused to listen. What happened in the end? Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou coughed continuously, trying to cover up their awkwardness, but they could not hide it at all. Where's Feng Xiang'e? Gu Chaoyang shifted his focus immediately. Now that the four of them had been ambushed and severely injured, it was a foregone conclusion that their capabilities would be depleted. The urgent matter at hand was to ascertain the uncertain factors. Was Feng Xiang'e the traitor? If he was, he should have taken action by now, right? The further question was, how could the three of them escape the conspirators' plot, given their current condition? Feng Xiang'e's condition isn't good. He's worse than you. Du Guchou's face was dark. You've regained consciousness now, at least, and can circulate your energy to heal yourself. Only his chest is rising and falling slightly, and there's still some warmth. The rest of him is cold. How could this be? Gu Chaoyang was shocked when he heard that. He lifted his head abruptly, wanting to sit up, but his reckless movement had already affected his wounds. His head felt like it was being hammered by 800 men in a frenzy. He moaned at once, "Io, this is really strong. Let's rest here for now. It's impossible for us to leave now." Ling Xiaozui sighed. We'll need at least half a month to recover from our injuries. We mustn't act recklessly in this half a month. Death awaits us if we go out. Gu Chaoyang rolled his eyes and said, I've told you that there's a bloodbath ahead, and I've also said that there's the danger of being trapped. You didn't believe me, did you? Do you believe me now? The old man who had the upper hand began to grumble and complain incessantly. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou knew that they were in the wrong, so they ignored him. After some time, Ling Xiaozui forced Gu Chaoyang to take another wave of medicine and slapped the back of his neck, stopping the fellow's incessant chatter and causing him to fall back into slumber. Fortunately, the fellow's cultivation method had recovered its self-defense ability, allowing him to circulate his energy to heal himself. There's still something odd about this. There are many things that don't make sense. Ling Xiaozui told Du Guchou, looking at the two unconscious fellows. Du Guchou scratched his head as well. Yes, it's really odd. Both of them frowned. Although they had been ambushed and were severely injured during the risky attack, they had eliminated the suspicion of Gu Chaoyang and Feng Xiang'e. Gu Chaoyang, who was the most suspicious, had risked falling out to propose a safety measure. It was a prerequisite to save everyone's lives. As for Feng Xiang'e, his injuries were too severe, so severe that it was still uncertain whether he could survive. If he were a spy, would he have to risk his life and play it so realistically? However, why would the Four Seasons Tower see through the enemy's plan and bury so many explosives? Could it be that they had been prepared and were only waiting for the moment the Almighty to strike? This explosion was simply too vicious. Both of them exchanged glances. While there was still a lingering fear in their hearts, they also felt that it was extremely odd and difficult to sort out their thoughts. Dugu, don't you think that our escape this time is still very easy? That we're very lucky? We fought the last time, but this time, we didn't even have a chance to meet, Ling Xiaozui said telepathically. Du Guchou nodded slowly as well. I'm thinking about this as well. According to the situation just now, if the Four Seasons Tower had really seen through the enemy's plan and set it up specifically for us, it's entirely possible that they could have used this explosion to bury us there. However, the men that they've arranged seem to be a little too far away, giving us too much time to react. This is indeed unusual. Ling Xiaozui nodded. According to Mr. Nian's intelligence, since he had predicted our second attack, such a mistake shouldn't have happened. In particular, it shouldn't have happened both times. Therefore, there must be a reason for this, a purpose. De Guichao's expression was dark. But what we're most passive about now is that we don't know what the other party's purpose is. Chapter 729. Ling Xiaozui sighed. This matter was a huge headache for the two experts. After a few attempts, nothing was found. They could only confirm that the other party had other motives. What was it? They were clueless. Everything was the same as before they came into contact with the Four Seasons Tower. Ling Xiaozui sighed and said, "When we recover in a few days, one of us will stay behind while the other goes in alone to investigate. The enemy is out in the open while we're in the dark. We have to find a way to improve the situation." De Guichao did not speak, only nodding slowly. Ling Xiaozui said, "The Four Seasons Tower's arrangement is completely illogical, but there's a terrifying motive hidden within this illogic. I'm afraid this is related to something even greater." De Guichao lifted his head slowly, his eyes gleaming with a sharp sword intent as he uttered word by word, "No matter what the motive is, they won't succeed." Compared to Ling Xiaozui and the others who were in dire straits, the Empire of Yutong had nothing to worry about now. The internal and external troubles were all gone, and the situation was unprecedented. The four borders were well trained and had a high morale. They trained their troops continuously and looked intimidating. Fang Qingtian was no longer weak, but he was in high spirits as if he had been reborn. Staying in the board of military every day, he did not speak or move, but it was enough to pacify the people. Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin were both energetic and physically fit, but they were old and could no longer rely on their muscles and bones. After Yun Yang's cheat, their bodies seemed to be rejuvenated despite their age, as if they were a dozen years younger. Their energy was unprecedentedly exuberant, to the point of eagerness. They had requested to head to the front line a few times to swap the two marshals back so that the two old men could have a second spring and write a new legend in the history of the war. In spite of this, Yutong, from the emperor himself down, be it the military or political parties, were all speechless, unable to respond for a long time. "What are you two old things up to? Do you know what you two are talking about? What do you want? If you two are so capable, why don't you just go to heaven?" Yutong had Tai Zheng in the north, Ling Shan in the south, Fu Baogua in the east, and Wang Yunzhu in the west. Each one of them was a veteran marshal. Including Sun Zihu and the others, they were all capable generals who could take charge. Every one of their subordinates was a warrior who had been through hundreds of battles, an elite troop. However, the more elite the army was, the more it meant that these people had their own personalities, and the harder it was to control them. They only believed in their superiors. Logically speaking, with the western border as an example, Sun Zihu would only listen to Wang Yunzhu. If Leng Daoyin and Wang Yunzhu's orders were to go against each other, there was a 99% chance that Sun Zihu would follow Wang Yunzhu. Come to think of it, there would not be any slip-ups if the two old men really went over. It was the same Western Front, but as long as it was Qiu Jianhan who went over, Wang Yunzhu, who was his disciple, would not say a word. Perhaps, he would even cry and shout, "Come, come, come, come." Similarly, if Leng Daoyin were to go to the southern border, there would be no problem. The reason was simpler and more brutal. The current marshal of the southern border, Leng Shan, was his son. Leng Shan's position as the marshal of the southern border was actually inherited from his father. But the problem was, you two old fogies with white hair and beards, who looked like they had one foot in the grave and were half dead just yesterday, actually wanted to play again. What were you playing? Playing cool? To be honest, Leng Daoyin, who was 5 to 6 years younger than Qiu Jianhan, really wanted to go out and take charge of the southern border. Fang Qingtian's health had been poor these few years, so it was difficult for him to have much energy to deal with the military. Once the war broke out, Leng Daoyin had been stationed at the Board of War. He was so bored that he was itching to go. The marshal of the southern border, Leng Shan, was the best at defense among Yutang's 4 marshals. His defensive skills were unparalleled in the world, but his military strategy was still lacking. Now that Yutang's internal worries were gone, and with the momentum of breaking the 4-nation siege, the border defense was showing signs of change. Leng Daoyin going to the southern border could make up for the lack of offensive strength in the southern border. In spite of this, Qiu Jinhan's plan was only to avoid His Majesty's questioning. Now, the emperor had to ask old Qiu every day, "What did Supreme Cloud say? Did you manage to contact Supreme Cloud? Who is Supreme Cloud?" Qiu Jinhan was miserable, racking his brains for a solution. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "I can't afford to offend you, but I can't avoid you. I'll go to the front line and stay far away from you, all right? I'll go to the western border and see Wang Yunju, to see how impressive the western elite troops he boasted about were, to see if they really had the elegance of his father's successor. I want to see if there are any good seedlings there, especially since I have the ultimate art of war waiting to be passed down." No matter how wonderful the idea was, it had to be realized. How could the front line be so easy to go to? His Majesty was adamant in his disagreement. "You want to go to the front line? You want to be treated and flattered by your disciples and grand disciples, you want to be far away from the emperor? You don't look that good, but you're dreaming. You must stay in the capital until I find out about Supreme Cloud." Qiu Jianhan could not extricate himself no matter what he did, so he said angrily, "If I can't go, then Leng Daoyin can't go either. Otherwise, this old man won't feel fair." His Majesty played right into his hands. He pointed at old Qiu's nose and hollered, "You 2 old bastards can't go anywhere. You're already so old, if anything happens to you, I won't be able to stop both of your families from crying." Truth be told, the last time Qiu Jianhan was in danger, His Majesty's heart ached. Therefore, Leng Daoyin was cooped up at home. When Leng Daoyin found out about this, he was so furious that he almost spat blood. He went around looking for Qiu Jianhan to pick a fight, but the latter avoided him, wholeheartedly looking for a disciple for wooing. On one hand, Leng Daoyin knew that he was in the wrong, so he hid far away. On the other hand, this matter was listed as Yutang's top secret by Qiu, Ling Fang, Tai Shengguan, and the others. It was also a pressing matter. The level of secrecy was even vaguely higher than that of the 9 Supremes. There was no harm without comparison. The 9 Supremes were still irreplaceable to Yutang, but the legend of the 9 Supremes was too lofty, unreachable, and elusive. Wu Ying's disciple, on the other hand, was something that could actually be done. As the few of them studied Wu Ying's works in detail, they were even more certain of Wu Ying's talent. If they could be under his tutelage, they would not have to worry about not being able to learn much. The few of them were smart people. They understood that this was a good opportunity. They wanted to use this opportunity to pick someone from their families to become Wu Ying's official disciple. However, after a few batches of them were sent over, they were all rejected by Wu Ying. They don't meet the requirements. Watching the young talents of their families being eliminated one after another, the few elders felt their stomachs clenched. "Our children are all outstanding. If you're not satisfied with this, what else do you want? What are you playing at?" After a few days of selection, Wu Ying had only chosen one person from the Qiu family's candidates. This person was only a peripheral descendant of the Qiu family, not a direct descendant of the family. He did not fancy any of the others. Leng Daoyin was infuriated by this. He was so furious that he almost sent a letter to summon his eldest son, the empire's southern marshal, Leng Shan, back to participate in the selection. However, in the next round of selection, the son of the Board of Punishment's Minister Wu Lai was chosen. Chapter 730. It was common knowledge that Wu Lai's son had no cultivation base. His legs were crippled, and he had even lost his sight for a long period of time. It was only because someone had saved him that he had regained what he had lost and was able to see again. Aside from all these, there was another impression that this child had given others. His mind did not seem to be in a clear state, a little like dementia. What could a person like this do even if he had recovered to his normal state? How could such a person win Wu Ying's favor? Perhaps, what was Wu Ying's standard to gain favor? My standard of choosing a disciple is one's temperament, talent and aptitude are secondary. Wu Lai's son is not old, but he has experienced far more than an ordinary person. His mind has been tempered to an indomitable state. He has no cultivation base and his physique is not suitable for cultivation, but it does not hinder my inheritance. It only needs to strengthen his body. However, this child's level of concentration is not something that most people in this world can achieve. It is the most commendable trait. Wu Ying said, furthermore, it is due to his family's upbringing and the temperament that has been passed down that he will never feel guilty in this life. Those who can keep their hearts as clear as a mirror and have a clear conscience are already the first choice of a civil official. The few elders were speechless when they heard this. At this point, Wu Ying had already chosen his two main disciples, a scholar and a martial one. What was left was probably to urge his two disciples to work harder and take in a few more registered disciples to accompany them in their studies. Wu Lai was pleasantly surprised that his son had been chosen. He was so surprised that he lost his composure, personally thanking Wu Ying, which was rare. It was also the first time in his life that he had ever given someone a gift, a piece of calligraphy that he had written himself, in broad daylight. Qiu Jianhan and the others scoffed at the gift, utterly disdainful. It was true that Wu Lai was an upright official and a capable official, but those 2 strokes of calligraphy were only passable. A gift to thank his master should be more solemn and more precious. You might as well not give this gift at all. Unexpectedly, Wu Ying seemed to have received the greatest compliment from Wu Lai's gift. He was so excited that he hung the calligraphy up carefully and hung it high in the main hall. Could it be that Wu Ying liked this thing? The big shots were overjoyed. In a few days, they collected a lot of calligraphy and paintings from famous people and sent them to the teacher, hoping that the teacher would accept 2 more students for the sake of everyone's good intentions and that the calligraphy and paintings were very precious. 2 sheep to let go, and a few more sheep to drive. Then, a few days later, he was told the bad news: Teacher Wu is boiling water with fire. The calligraphy and paintings that were sent over are used to start the fire. It will last for a while. The few big shots were speechless and stunned on the spot. What are you doing? What was he doing? You liked a few words written by a certain someone. We really thought that you liked this thing, so we sent you the famous calligraphy and paintings. They are all truly rare treasures. Saying that each word is worth 1,000 gold is the most modest way of saying it. How could Wu Lai's 2 strokes of calligraphy compare to it? They are completely incomparable. Even if you don't say that it is a precious collection, you can't use it to start a fire. What a lunatic. How could they know that Wu Ying was even more restrained towards materialistic desires because of his stain? Wu Lai was known as the Iron Sky, the most righteous person in the Empire of Yutong. His gift of the Iron Sky in broad daylight meant a lot to Wu Ying. It was a huge acknowledgement. That was why he accepted it and was even more ecstatic because it was a gift from Wu Lai. As for the ones given by others, it was really just a piece of paper with words and drawings on it. How could it be of any more use? A blank piece of paper could still be of some use. What else could a used piece of paper be used for if not used to start a fire? Qiu Jianhan and the others' understanding of Wu Ying was too superficial. They did not know what Wu Ying had been through or what he had done, so how could they understand Wu Ying's true intentions? Just as the few big shots were racking their brains, hoping to win Wu Ying over, a shocking piece of news came. Something major had happened in the Empire of Zhou. The Empire of Zhou's royal family had rebelled. The prince had rebelled and dragged the Emperor of Zhou down from his throne. The rebel army and the army that came to rescue the emperor fought endlessly. It was difficult to determine the winner, so the entire empire of Zhou was in chaos. The Western marshal, Wang Yunzhu, asked, should we seize the opportunity to march westward and annihilate the empire of Zio? Naturally, His Majesty had summoned all the big shots for a discussion upon receiving such a shocking piece of news. This was undoubtedly the best opportunity to expand Yutong's territory. It could even be the prelude to Yutong's war of conquest. However, the bigger the movement, the more cautious they had to be, especially now that they had yet to fully understand why such a large-scale rebellion had suddenly broken out in the empire of Zio. According to Zio's situation in recent years, even if the Emperor of Zio's performance could not be considered remarkable, it was still average. No matter what, it should be able to be maintained for another 1 or 2 generations. The current rebellion had come without a reason. Since there was no reason, they had to think carefully about whether there was something fishy about it. Was it a trap? A trap targeted at Yutong. Wu Ying and the others observed the sky at night. Because of the implied meaning, they quickly came to a conclusion: Zio's national fortune had truly dissipated. Even if Yutong did not send its troops, the current rebellion would be the last straw that would wipe the empire of Zio off the map of the continent. Everyone was at a loss regarding this matter. The empire of Zio, which was known as one of the top 5 empires in the world, had actually lost its national fortune. What was going on? No matter what, everyone realized that this was a God-given opportunity. After the Board of War's discussion, Wu Ying quickly came up with a detailed battle plan. His sword was pointed at Zio, and he would annihilate it at full speed. This was a battle to annihilate an empire. Other than the Western troop, which would attack at full force, the Southern troop and the Northern troop would each deploy 100,000 men to support the Western troop from both sides. This was to ensure the advantage of military strength and end the battle quickly. The strategy that Wu Ying had come up with was meticulous and detailed. Every step of the plan, even the daily mission, was clearly planned. A God-given opportunity: annihilate Zio in one battle. The Eastern Line, Fu Baoguo's troops, break out of the Fortress of Resilience and deploy troops at Dongxuan's border. Prevent Dongxian from acting recklessly. If Dongxian makes a move, we must attack them at all costs. The Southern Line, the Cold Mountain Tribe, spread the rumor that Supreme Cloud will come to the southern border to participate in the war, intending to shake Daiyuan's foundation. The Northern Line, the Steel Cavalry of Tai Zhang's troop, attack from all sides. Fight on your own, split into 10 teams to harass the enemy in the north, and suppress them within our territory. From today onwards, Tai Zhang will rush to the northern border to guard the north. The nation will begin recruiting soldiers. The time to unify Tianxian is here. Now is the time to build a foundation. Chapter 731. The Empire of Yutong, which had just quieted down for a few days, was suddenly like a spring that had been wound up in a pot of boiling porridge. The entire empire was operating at a high speed, boiling over. A man should serve his country. The heroes are at the front line. Today is the day to build one's career. This is the last chance. Every recruitment point set up across Yutong was filled to the brim with people the moment the recruitment began. This was the aspiration of Yutong's millions of people. To Yutong's people who had had enough of being bullied and had always been passively beaten, the chance to counterattack was like a shot of adrenaline being pumped into everyone. The day of revenge has finally arrived. Under Wu Ying's arrangement, the entire empire of Yutong was filled with a murderous aura. Even the women were filled with righteousness and righteousness. Even the uncles and aunties who were buying groceries on the streets were infused with a sense of valor. The clouds of war were thick, covering the entire territory of Yutong in a very short amount of time. At the same time, Sun Zihu led 50,000 Yutong cavalrymen and charged into the empire of Zio like a gigantic steel saber. Wang Yunzhu led the Western Frontline's main force of 400,000 men and marched westward. Wherever they went, war banners blotted out the sky. The military was majestic and majestic. The war of annihilation led by Yutong had begun in full swing. Wu Ying oversaw the Board of War, allocating the rations, soldiers' pay, weapons, and all resources needed for this war, sending them to the front line in an orderly yet well-organized manner. Yutong had launched this war with all its might. The War of Peace had begun. Watching from such a close distance for the first time, Fang Qingtian, Qiu Jianhan, and Leng Daoyin, the three military leaders, realized in shock that Wu Ying had actually completed everything on his own. This fellow probably had no family, no wife, no children, and only needed to be responsible to the Emperor of Yutong. He could even skip sleep when he was busy. In spite of this, everyone was happy to see it happen. After all, even if the three of them worked together, they might not be as efficient and accurate as Wu Ying alone. Although the three of them had the reputation of being hoodlums, they were broad-minded people deep down. Even though they had been reduced to 3 senior staff officers drinking tea in the military headquarters, they were still full of joy. The truth before them made them feel reassured and gratified by Wu Ying's abilities. Of course, they were still a little jealous. Residents of Yun. Shangguan Lingxiu arrived in her martial attire. "What is it?" Yin Yang asked. "This time, Yutong has mobilized the army to annihilate the empire of Zhou. The Shangguan family and Zhou are mortal enemies. How can we not fight? I have come to bid farewell to young master." Yin Yang pursed his lips. "Why would you need to participate in such a small battle? Wouldn't that lower your status?" Shangguan Lingxiu raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to retort, someone waved his hand and said, "Summon the 6 young fellows from the Shangguan family." Yin Yang ordered as the 6 children hurried over, "The 6 of you, follow the army and announce to the world that the Shangguan family of generals has descended upon the world once more, to put an end to the grudge with Zhou." Shangguan Lingxiu was shocked to hear that. How can this be? They were still so young. There will be a time for them to go to the battlefield in the future, but not now. If we skip this battle, there might not be many battles that will require them in the future. Yin Yang was resolute. "Put your heart at ease. They have learned a lot now. Although they are young, it doesn't mean that their combat power is weak. Their combat power is no longer below that of ordinary generals. Other than nurturing the children of the family of generals, actual combat is also necessary, especially this battle. If you miss it, there won't be another chance." He turned to look into Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes. In the past, many children of the family of generals had died on the battlefield. It wasn't because of their lack of military training or cultivation base, it was because of their lack of experience in the battlefield. Instead of saying that they lost to the enemy's schemes, it's better to say that they were not prepared at all. In a battle that is almost certain to win like this, they should be tossed in and nurtured continuously. This is the best way to make them mature quickly. These 6 little fellows are still young, but it's not as if there are no benefits to them. If they join the army, the generals will definitely take care of them, and that's already something we don't need to think about. Coupled with their own abilities and equipment, it'll be hard for them to have any accidents. Yin Yang's voice was calm but his words were heavy. The Shangguan family of generals' road to rise again should begin with this battle. Sister Lingxiu, you should actually think about it carefully. If you were to represent the family of generals again at this time, it would mean that the Shangguan family of generals has already fallen and there's no more male heirs. Think about it, don't you agree? From now on, you have to try your best not to stand out. Let your children go out and face things and solve them. This is the right thing to do. Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lip and lowered her head. Yin Yang's words might not be easy for ordinary people to understand, but to Shangguan Lingxiu, she could understand it immediately. Not only did these words make sense, they were also the truth. But they're still so young. What if, at this moment, it's already a what if? Isn't it a 1 in a million situation like this? If we still can't give it our all and we have to wait for an opportunity. Even if you were to step out this time and wait until they grow up and reach Shangguan Wudi's level, there's still a what if. However, I dare say that the situation then won't be as good as it is now. Yin Yang interrupted her, "It's reasonable for you to care for them, but your heart. Sigh, even if they grow up for another 100 years, they'll still be small in front of you and in your heart." Shangguan Lingxiu did not speak. After a long time, she bit her lip hard and said, "All right. We'll listen to you this time." Compared to Shangguan Lingxiu's verbal agreement but her actual anxiety, the 6 children were eager to go to war this time. Their hearts were filled with excitement that was clearly expressed in their expressions. Yin Yang watched coldly from the sidelines as he watched the excitement on the 6 young faces, his heart unmoved. Once they were on the battlefield and used to seeing death, such excitement and agitation would vanish without a trace. The battlefield had always been the best place for a person to mature quickly. He believed that after this battle, these 6 children would be reborn as if they were Buddhas, metamorphosing and improving themselves. However, there was no other way. They were the children of the family of generals. Their future would always be a struggle between life and death. This was their destiny. It could not be changed. And. Chapter 732. Shangguan Lingxiu could support them for a while, but she could not support them forever. Similarly, Yin Yang could not change their destinies either. The only thing he could do was to bring their destinies forward as much as he could, to make them safer and more stable, to increase their starting point from what was already a very high point. In addition, he had to provide the children with a background that no one would dare to provoke. Up until now, who in the continent dared to provoke Supreme Cloud in this world? That would be seeking death. Do not be impatient. Did they not see that Han Sanhe was killed? Bao was reluctant to part with his companions, his eyes brimming with tears. There's no need to be envious or sad. When the war to conquer Dongxian comes, no matter how young you are, I'll definitely let you go to the battlefield and fight alongside your companions. Yin Yang's promise brightened Bao's eyes. Thank you, Uncle Yun. You don't have to thank me. I'm very afraid of your parents now. Other than scolding me, they'll beat me up too. I'm still shaken. Yin Yang answered in a low voice. If Supreme Earth and Supreme Water were still here, they would definitely beat Yin Yang up for making this promise. Whether they thought that it was reasonable or right, Yin Yang, who had made this decision, had to be beaten up. However, Yin Yang would not change his decision. There was no turning back. As an emperor who would pacify the world and lead the world, he had to enter the battlefield and participate in decisive battles. Only by experiencing the brutality of the battlefield and the sharpness of the bloodshed could one understand the value of a soldier's sacrifice, understand the hardships of a soldier and the hardships of the front line. If not for this, how could he protect the country? Dynasties and empires had fallen after a few generations. A large part of the reason was that the emperors had grown up in the palace since young. They did not know or understand anything. What they had seen and heard was nothing more than the teachings of the Grand Tutor and civil officials, the records in books and documents, and the words and atmosphere of the palace maids and eunuchs around them. Living in such a living environment, it was inevitable that one would subconsciously place more importance on the civil side than the military. They would also be intimidated by the murderous aura of the generals. No matter how much the generals tried to conceal their murderous aura, it was still a great deterrent to those who had never been on the battlefield. Sometimes, the so-called high achievements might not really mean that their achievements were too high. It was just that they caused too much of a deterrence to their superiors. Any superiors who felt this kind of pressure from their subordinates again and again would feel extremely uncomfortable and uncontrollable. They would subconsciously reject them. When a country began to value culture over military force, it was a sign that it had begun to go downhill. Correspondingly, the day of destruction would not be too far away. Since the beginning of time, no one had ever been inferior. Shangguan Lingxiu was stopped by Yun Yang, but the 8,000 steel guards of the Shangguan family who originally belonged to Shangguan Lingxiu continued to escort the 6 young masters according to the original plan. This decision made Wang Yunzhu, the Western Army's commander-in-chief, flip the table, smash the teacup, and seethe in anger. Motherf *Ker, do you think this is a nursery? This was a battlefield. It was a battlefield. Do you know that this is AF *King battlefield? What do you want your father to do by sending 6 of these little things over? Are the brains of the Board of War's people stuffed with sh*t? He had his aides submit a petition on the spot, requesting for the 6 children to be sent back. In spite of this, Wu Ying, who was in charge of the Board of War, knew at once that it was Yun Yang's decision for the 6 children to participate in the war. How could he reject Lord Supreme Cloud's intention? He ordered Wang Yunzhu directly, 2 choices. First, look after the children and win the war. Second, you come back and let Qiu Jianhan lead the troops in your place. Faced with this choice, Wang Yunzhu wilted immediately. From the bottom of his heart, he had really hoped that his teacher, Qiu Jianhan, could come to the western frontline and watch the war of annihilation that he was presiding over. Not as a substitute. If he were to be sent back because of the 6 children now. His teacher, Qiu Jianhan, had just forgiven him and he was in the limelight of Yutang's first war in this world. He was at the height of his success and was in high spirits. If he were to go back because of the 6 children and have his teacher replace him, Wang Yunzhu could totally imagine what kind of ending he would receive. It would be a light punishment to be expelled from the school immediately. I choose the first one. I'll definitely look after the children and win the war. Wang Yunzhu corrected himself immediately. Actually, I've long wanted to groom a few rising talents. I like these 6 children of the Shengguan family the moment I see them. I'm just afraid that my lack of talent and knowledge will hinder the children's development. The military subordinates were dumbfounded, their eyes filled with disbelief as they watched their marshal write his reply in a fawning manner. Qiu Jianhan, who was in the capital city, slammed the table and cursed when he heard the news. Little brat, this old man wants to *ck all 8 generations of your ancestors. How dare you reject such a God-given opportunity? I know that you're lacking in talent and knowledge, but don't you know to let your father go? Yin Yang had been quiet during this period of time. Other than training the mystical beasts, torturing the 4 noble young masters, and chatting with Shangguan Lingxiu about military affairs, he had sparred with Ji Lingxi. The last point, however, made him feel the fear of being dominated by despair. Not only had Emmy recovered to its original state during this period of time, it had also advanced a lot. The spiritual qi that it could provide now was at a terrifying level in Yun Yang's eyes. Ever since Yun Yang had consumed the treasured resources that Yun Zuyu had given him, his body had been in a steady and continuous state of exuding energy. There was no leakage at all as it turned into mystical qi and assimilated into Yun Yang's body. Furthermore, the endless divine art that Yun Yang cultivated was also a superb cultivation method that was unparalleled in the continent. According to Yun Yang's understanding, this cultivation method could surpass any cultivation method in this world in terms of improvement speed, and it could absorb spiritual qi at least twice as fast. It could be said that the efficiency of Yun Yang's cultivation for a day was at least comparable to a month's worth of ordinary cultivation geniuses. 10 days of focused cultivation was equivalent to a year's worth of hard work for others. Such a speed of improvement was unprecedented throughout the history of Tianxian. It was unparalleled in the world. Ji Lingxi's cultivation method, on the other hand, was at the pinnacle of the continent, perhaps even more efficient than the cultivation methods known in this world, but it was still much slower than the endless divine art. A conservative estimate would say that the difference was at least double that of the endless divine art. In spite of this, Ji Lingxi's improvement in ability still managed to overpower Yun Yang. What was even more outrageous was that the gap was growing wider by the day. It was only a difference of 3 minor levels today, but it might be a difference of 4 levels tomorrow. Yun Yang cultivated with all his might, refusing to believe it. He requested for Emmy to transfer energy to him endlessly, causing Emmy to groan and complain. It was not easy for him to advance to the 7th heaven of Dao realm during this period of time. Even if such a speed of improvement was not unparalleled, it was still something to be proud of. Chapter 733. Ji Lingxi's improvement in cultivation base was completely unreasonable. A few days ago, she was only slightly beyond the Dao realm, but now, she had completely stabilized her cultivation base. During her sparring session with Yun Yang, her aura had unexpectedly experienced an explosive growth. Yin Yang was very familiar with this sudden aura because it was an aura that would only erupt when one's cultivation base had a breakthrough and was not under control. Another breakthrough. This meant that Ji Lingxi had taken another step forward on the unknown path of an advanced cultivation base. The gap between the two of them was visible to the naked eye. Faced with the reality of an even greater gap, Yin Yang was dumbfounded and speechless. What was going on? This was an unbelievable and incomprehensible form of cheating. What cultivation method are you cultivating? Is it convenient for you to reveal it? Yin Yang asked with a frown. Yes, Phoenix, no. Ji Lingxi was halfway through her answer and a hint of confusion appeared on her face. I don't think I am now. The cultivation method I'm cultivating now seems to be called the Nine Heavens Mantra. I don't know what's going on either. Yin Yang pursed his lips. Changing one's basic cultivation method is a huge taboo in cultivation. Forget it, that's not important. But you don't even know your own cultivation method. What's going on? I've never cultivated this cultivation method before. It really only appeared recently, like it appeared out of thin air, but it feels like I've been cultivating it for a long time. It's as if I've been cultivating it for a long time. There are no obstacles at all. Everything is so smooth, like it's made by God. Ji Lingxi replied in a daze. Yin Yang was speechless for a good while. This matter, why did it sound so mysterious? Now that I think about it, there must be a huge problem with my birth. Ji Lingxi sighed. I don't know what kind of existence my seemingly unreliable father is. This cultivation method of mine should be something imprinted in my memory, but I really don't have the slightest bit of knowledge about these things. Yin Yang nodded and said, it doesn't matter. It's fine as long as there's no harm. He sighed inwardly. How could he even explain it? Ji Lingxi did not even know the cultivation method she was cultivating, but she was advancing at such a rapid pace. He knew everything clearly, but he couldn't catch up no matter how hard he tried. Ji Lingxi gritted her teeth and said, throughout the ages, I've never seen a father who cheated a girl like this. When I find him, I will pull out all his hair and beard. I'm so angry. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. He stamped his feet and said, I'm so angry, I'm so angry. That old bastard, I really want to stab him now. Yin Yang coughed, exasperated. A sudden impulse rose within him and he could not help saying, when you plan to beat him up, count me in. During this period of time, he was tormented by the red light to the point where he wished he was dead. It was impossible for Yin Yang to say that he did not have any complaints after going through so many life and death situations. Coupled with the resentment of using cheats instead of risking his life, he really wanted to beat that old bastard up. What kind of father are you? Ji Lingxi nodded in agreement. Let's beat him up together when we find him. Yin Yang scratched his head and said, if you beat him up, he probably won't dare to retaliate. That's family happiness, but I'm his son-in-law. It's not right to do this, it's treacherous. Ji Lingxi was stunned when she heard him. Her face and ears reddened as she said, shameless. Whose son-in-law are you? Humph. She lifted her head and turned to leave. Yin Yang coughed. I'm going to the front line to take a look. Are you coming? Ji Lingxi turned around at once, her eyes gleaming. When? When the 10 Yama kings return, I'll depart. Are you coming? Yin Yang answered. I'll go with you. Ji Lingxi decided immediately. After a pause, she said, Sister Lingxiu, let's ask her to come as well. During this period of time, Ji Lingxi and Shangguan Lingxiu's relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. There was no doubt that Shangguan Lingxiu was a very, very good girl. Whether it was her personality or the way she conducted herself, she was magnanimous, gentle, kind, considerate of the bigger picture, and loyal. The strength in her bones, in particular, was evident and commendable. To any man who knew her well, this kind of woman was a priceless treasure that was worth cherishing. Even Ji Lingxi, who was also a woman and a rival in love, was full of admiration for Shangguan Lingxiu. Ji Lingxi's psychological journey towards Shangguan Lingxiu was full of twists and turns. From admiration at the beginning, to getting close to her, to being extremely close to her, to realizing that she had fallen in love with the same man, with such an outstanding person. However, she could not bring herself to hate or resent her. She kept a small distance, but it did not take long for her to get closer again. Gradually, she began to tolerate her, and as they got to know each other better, she grew to admire and like her even more. Finally, she realized that living together was not something unacceptable. In the end, Ji Lingxi had gained a bestie who was almost as good as Yu Rulan. Ji Lingxi was a woman as well. She had the heart of a girl who wanted to monopolize her lover and would not allow anyone else to share, but she was helpless when the time came. She did not know when the red glow on her would disappear or become ineffective. What was the point of forcefully occupying Yun Yang and not letting any other woman get close to her? What good could come of it? The relationship between people needed to be tempered and cultivated. If she persisted for a long time, the final result would only be to force Yun Yang to drift further away from her or even leave her forever. If it really came to that, she would not even be able to maintain her basic identity and status. That would be asking for trouble. Instead of going to such extremes, it was better for her to take a step back first and let Yun Yang be touched by her sacrifice. This was not playing petty tricks, but the wisdom of one's way of interacting with others. Perhaps, it could be said to be a little cunning of a girl. If she wanted to have him for a long time, why not take a step back first? As long as she did not lose the momentum, the advantages would outweigh the disadvantages. Shangguan Lingxiu had undoubtedly fulfilled all the basic conditions for Ji Lingxi to take a step back. It could even be said that Shangguan Lingxiu's existence had, to a certain extent, helped her avert the most awkward situation. With Shangguan Lingxiu at the forefront, she was protecting both of their interests. Therefore, this could be considered a good thing. Every time she thought about it, she could not help but feel embarrassed, angry, and helpless at the same time. Her anger towards her father, whom she had never met, grew to a whole new level. Other fathers love their daughters meticulously. What you're doing. Although it's also meticulous, it's too meticulous. I understand that you're doing this to protect your daughter. There's no doubt that you're doing this with good intentions. There's nothing wrong with that, but there must be a limit to everything, no? Once things are handled too excessively, it'll be too extreme. Although I won't go as far as to give myself up before we get married. Will I be severely injured with just a touch? Will I die with just a touch? Will any man in this world be able to endure such a thing? Which hero can endure a woman like this for a long time? It was only because Yun Yang's skin was thick and his recovery ability was astonishing. If it were someone else, he might have died 100 times over. Chapter 734. It was not an exaggeration at all. Had it not been for Yun Yang, it would have been a conservative estimate of 1,000 to 800 rounds, let alone 180 rounds. This world had always been a place where men were superior to women. It was common for men to have multiple wives and concubines. Now, Yin Yang had placed a restriction on his daughter that would kill anyone who touched it. Did he want his daughter to be a bachelor for the rest of her life? At least, based on the current situation, it could not be removed within a short period of time. Did she really have to watch the man she liked become someone else's husband? How many years would she have to wait for the red light to disappear before she could take him back? By then, this man would probably already have many wives and concubines by his side. Would she, the first wife, have to be the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth wife? Perhaps, by then, this man would already be dead. Are you trying to get me killed? I really don't know what that old thing is thinking. Ji Lingxi thought hatefully, her teeth grinding loudly. Luckily, I still have Shangguan Lingxiu on my side. It's also because of family issues that I don't dare to step out of the relationship between a man and a woman. It's really temporary for him and it's going to be resolved soon. As for me, it's going to be for the rest of my life. What an old bastard. Sigh. Yin Yang waited for a day, but the 10 kings had yet to return. Amidst his thoughts, he heaved a rare sigh. It's time for the 9 supremes to unite, Yin Yang said quietly. It looks like all of you won't be coming back. As Supreme Cloud, I won't ignore the war, but the 9 supremes can't be involved in everything either. When I'm done with the matters here in the capital, I'll go to the front line to take a look. Don't worry. Everything will be carried out according to plan. I am Supreme Cloud, Yutong's Supreme Cloud, forever. Actually, I've never wanted to take this step. But I can't do it now. Yin Yang walked out of his room in a purple robe. Ji Lingxi was cultivating under the flowering tree in the yard. She had long felt that cultivating in Yin Yang's small yard was much more efficient than anywhere else. In the yard, especially under the flowering tree, the effect was more than twice that of other places. Although Ji Lingxi did not understand why, she still subconsciously chose this place to cultivate whenever she wanted to. For a martial artist, nothing was more important than improving their strength. Just as he was cultivating, he saw Yin Yang walk out of his room with a solemn expression. His aura exuded an indescribable sense of sorrow and oppression. He couldn't help asking, "Where are you going?" For some reason, Ji Lingxi felt an inexplicable ripple in her heart. She could vaguely feel that the place Yin Yang was about to go to was closely related to her. The feeling was inexplicable, but it was strangely real. With this thought in mind, he blurted out without hesitation, "Can I go with you?" Yin Yang thought about it and shook his head decisively. No. She did not expect Yin Yang to reject her. She murmured in disappointment, "Why?" Yin Yang said faintly, "There are some places that only I can enter." Ji Lingxi snorted and turned back to her room in a huff. When Yin Yang went out, he followed him quietly. "I don't believe that you'll be able to leave me behind with my current level of cultivation and power." However, after Yin Yang left the house, he really disappeared after turning a corner. When Ji Lingxi chased after him, there was no trace of him left. Ji Lingxi stomped her feet in frustration. "Damn it, I forgot that this bastard has the art of transformation." She lifted her head to look at the clouds in the sky, her expression conflicted. Which one is it? Is it the one that looks like a rabbit, or is it the one that looks like a bear? Sigh, some things really couldn't be done as one wished with a high cultivation base. Unless one's cultivation base was high enough, so high that no one or thing could be beyond one's control, otherwise, just like these clouds, what the hell are these things, the residents of 9 supremes? The 9 supremes, which had not been seen for a long time, stood in silence as usual. Yin Yang transformed into a cloud and hovered in midair, observing the formation that was shrouded in clouds and mist for a long time. At this moment, the clouds that flashed through his eyes were like the clouds that he himself had transformed into, passing by leisurely. This time, he stayed outside the residence of 9 supremes for a long time before he leaped down. As the saying went, one's emotions were frail when one was close to one's home. Yin Yang's current mood was similar. Ever since he knew that his brothers might still be alive, the sorrow that had accumulated in his heart had lessened considerably. However, as long as he came here, he would always feel an inexplicable sense of worry. After all, it was only a possibility that they were still alive. How realistic was this possibility? What if he had guessed wrongly? Various thoughts arose one after another, his heart in turmoil. It was difficult for him to feel at ease for a moment. However, no matter how troubled he was, he still had to face reality. In the residence of 9 supremes. In front of his third brother Supreme Wood's room. Yin Yang stood for a while, and as he cultivated the first stage of sacred wood charm, he placed his hand on the door. A moment later, the door quietly opened. Just like the previous doors, a fresh and clean aura immediately greeted him. Yin Yang was slightly taken aback. Lifting his head to look, he saw that the room was filled with lush potted plants. There were 4 shelves in each of the 4 directions, and on each shelf were 3 potted plants. The plants were green and rich, and all of them were exuding a strong aura of life. It made one feel relaxed and happy, and it was fascinating to look at. It should be noted that no one had entered the room for almost 3 years. Naturally, no one had taken care of them, watered them, or cultivated them. However, the 12 potted plants that Yun Yang could see were brimming with vitality, showing no signs of decay at all. It was incredible. In spite of this, Yun Yang ignored it after a quick glance and shifted his gaze to the table. Other than the potted plants, there was only a table and a chair in the room. On top of the table was a letter. It was Supreme Wood's will. Yun Yang could still vividly recall his third brother Supreme Wood's warm gaze, as if he would never lose his temper. He would always do things slowly, unhurriedly, but methodically, with a sense of tension and relaxation. His personality was, in fact, the more prominent one among the brothers. They had been together for so many years, but Yun Yang had never seen his third brother lose his temper. He had always taken good care of each of his brothers. Each time Yun Yang was by his third brother's side, even if he did not speak or make a sound, he would feel a sense of warmth as if he was bathed in the spring breeze. Chapter 735. There was no doubt that this was Supreme Wood's will. However, Yun Yang had only read the beginning of Supreme Wood's will and he could already feel that its content was different from the others. Ninth brother, you're here. If I'm not wrong, then when you see this letter, it should be 3 years after our accident. I also know that the person who comes will definitely be you. Isn't it strange? Yun Yang perked up when he read the letter. His hands that had always been steady began to tremble. 3 years after our incident? What did this mean? Could it be that Supreme Wood's third brother had already known that there would be an accident and had even predicted the time? I wanted to write a will like them, but I think that you must be on the verge of breaking down from the torment that you've endured all the way until now. I'm the only one who might know some inside information. I can't bear to let you suffer alone, so I'm leaving you a little bit of information here. When you read this letter, when you read this, you should be enlightened. I'll take it that you'll understand half of it. Don't ask me why it's half, because I actually don't know the other half. Thank you, OL 9th. When Yun Yang read up to this point, his heart that had been hanging in the air could finally be at ease. He almost cried tears of joy and sang a song. For a moment, he felt a lump in his throat. The boiling emotions that had been stored in his heart could not be contained. Yun Yang really wanted to sing, to dance, to scream, to yell, to jump, to vent the excitement in his heart. His brothers were not dead after all. Lied to me? What does it matter if they lied to me? Torture? What does it matter if I'm tortured? None of this matters. It didn't matter what he did. As long as they could live, as long as they were still alive. That was the best thing that could happen. The so-called joy in this world was nothing more than this. Yun Yang clutched the letter to his chest and breathed deeply, exhaling slowly. His face was beaming with joy and delight. It was only after a while that he managed to suppress his excitement and continued reading. The formation of the 9 Supremes is the will of the Creator, it's a predestined number. Only the candidates for the 9 Supremes are chosen by someone else. There are coincidences, necessity, and also cue cutters. I'm a cue cutter. Yun Yang frowned as he read the words, incomprehensible thoughts swirling in his heart. The word cue jumper was easy to understand, but the first line, the formation of the 9 Supremes, was the will of the Creator. Since it was the work of the Creator, whether it was intentional or not, it should be an unshakable destiny. Then, how could there be the so-called cutting the cue? Who could cut the cue? Actually, I don't really remember much, only some fragments. It's probably because my physique is special and different from others. I knew that after this incident, I would have to go back to where I came from. But I don't know where I came from, and I don't know what's going on with the others. What's the situation? Yun Yang bit his lips tightly, the doubts in his heart growing. The memory fragments buried deep in my heart tell me that my surname is Tan. This surname is strange and rare, isn't it? I think it's strange too, but what's stranger is my name. It's actually called Tan Yi. It's said that when my father gave me my name, a group of brothers gathered together to come up with the idea of calling me Tan Yi. It meant that anyone who had something they were hesitating about could come and talk to me. Don't ask me why I suddenly brought up this topic, because this is the clearest memory fragment buried deep in my heart. Other than that, I don't even know who my father is. Looking at the ellipsis in the letter, Yun-yang almost laughed out loud. He could totally imagine his third brother's speechless resentment towards his own name. Tan Yi. This name, it was truly a strange one. Come and talk to me if there's anything you're hesitating about. What a great idea. The person who came up with the idea was talented, but the person who decided on the name was even more talented. I'm cultivating a wood-based cultivation method, a completely supportive one. This suits my personality very well. I've always liked to help others. When I was choosing back then, I naturally chose the wood-based cultivation method, but this seems to be different from my father's original intention. I remember being beaten up many times, but eldest uncle was very appreciative of it. He protected me every time. Alright, the recollection of my memory fragments ends here. There doesn't seem to be anything more. These few years are the happiest days of my life, having so many brothers working hard together. It's a pity that it's all so short. Now that I have to leave, I'm filled with reluctance. Right, I always feel a sense of familiarity when I meet OL 5th and OL 8th, but I've never seen their shadow in my memory. This situation is very strange. However, this should be a good thing. I think OL 5th and OL 8th might be cue cutters as well. OL 9th, if something happens to all of us one day, OL 5th and OL 8th should be the three people you don't have to worry about the least. Reading up to this point, Yun Yang's heart clenched once more. What did he mean by only OL 3rd, OL 5th and OL 8th? What about the others? Could the others still be in danger? Thinking of this, Yun Yang quickly recalled the past. 5th and 8th sisters-in-law Yun Zuyu and Yu Rulan's inexplicable disappearance and third brother's unique letter proved that they had not met with death, but it also proved something else. For example, 7th brother, old Dugu's only son, he would definitely not be a cue cutter. Eldest brother and 4th sister, they too, I can't be sure about the whereabouts of the other brothers, but eldest brother is definitely not. The eldest brother in my memory isn't this current eldest brother. The 9 Supremes are unique existences that don't exist in heaven and earth. Therefore, out of the so-called 9 Supremes, only one will be left in the end. This is also fate. Supreme Wood's message was messy, as if he was trying hard to recall, trying to give Yun Yang more hints, but he could not recall anything no matter how hard he tried. Therefore, life and death is inevitable. Don't be blindly optimistic about the separation of life and death. Reading this, Yun Yang suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was unavoidable, unavoidable. Did this mean that someone among the brothers would definitely die? However, everyone's fate has always been inextricably linked to yours. Supreme Wood's message continued, one day in the future, if you can reach the level of dominating the universe, you can use your divine power to reverse time and revive the dead. Anything is possible for those who have reached that level. There's nothing that can't be done if you put your heart into it. Let's cut to the chase. My cultivation method, the so-called sacred wood charm, can't even be considered a trivial art. I don't mind giving it up and cultivate the art of vitality that I've always been cultivating. Remember to cultivate well. OL 2nd's golden charm is below. You can use it to open OL 2nd's room. Speaking of which, OL 2nd is also a ruthless character that I haven't seen through. The main reason is that I don't think the golden charm is of much use either. This can be considered as a reason. Alright, let's cut to the chase. We brothers will definitely meet one day. When that time comes, let's not stop until we're drunk. Supreme Wood's message came to an end. Yin Yang was dumbstruck. Chapter 736. There were too many things revealed in this, and there were too many things that could not be understood. The wills left behind by the other brothers were all genuine wills. Third Brother Supreme Wood's will, on the other hand, was more like an instruction manual. It meant that he had an extraordinary background, it meant that the 9 Supremes were extraordinary, it meant that a few of his brothers were extraordinary. However, there were even more unexplainable things. The Creator's arrangement, someone intervened in the selection of the 9 Supremes, cutting. So many people with extraordinary backgrounds intervened in the 9 Supremes' descent. What kind of people were they? The final conclusion was that third brother, fifth brother, and eighth brother must be fine. The eldest in his memory was not Supreme Earth, it was someone else. There must be a separation of life and death among the rest of the brothers. There was nothing more about their identities. His memory was blurry, he could not recall it. The residence of 9 Supremes' sacred wood charm, which was originally a wood-based arcane art, was but a useless skill that he did not hesitate to discard. My cultivation method, the art of vitality, is the real deal. Father. Eldest uncle, the second brother mentioned at the end of the text seemed to have a different background. Yin Yang did not know what it meant and why it was specifically mentioned. It was intriguing, there was also the far-reaching ambition, fate was related to you. When you became the ruler of the universe, you could cross the boundaries of time and space and resurrect anyone you wanted. These were the gist of what Supreme Wood had left behind in his book. In spite of this, these things were too abstruse, unimaginable, and beyond his knowledge. It made Yin Yang's usually clear mind feel like it was a ball of paste, or rather, a pot of boiled porridge. Everything in Supreme Wood's letter was like a fog in the clouds. All the words, really, all the words, were only half written, not a single sentence was completed. After sorting through Supreme Wood's words, the most direct impression Yin Yang had was that his third brother's father was a weirdo. A weirdo who could stand shoulder to shoulder with a certain violent female father. He had actually named his own son as Talk. Why didn't you play a little? As for the rest, it was a complete mess and was unclear. His previously relaxed and even joyful mood was once again raised, suspended, and hung high up in the air. He had thought that his brothers had not perished and had been rescued, but it seemed that the chances were not optimistic. Right now, the only ones who could confirm that they were fine were Old Third, Old Fifth, and Old Eighth. At most, there would be the addition of second brother, who might have some other background. As for the rest, it was all up to the heavens. Even so, I'm relieved of 2 things. Yin Yang chuckled bitterly. At the very least, it looks like 5th sister-in-law Yun Zuyu and 8th sister-in-law Yu Rolan have been taken away by 5th and 8th brother. They're really fine now. This also explains why Sister Yu gave me so many treasures, and why Sister Lan's letter was so strange. For a moment, Yin Yang could not tell if he was sad or happy. He only felt that his heart was a mess, so complicated that he was at a loss, unable to think. Yin Yang stayed in the small room for a long time before he finally whispered, "Third brother, thank you." These words came from the bottom of his heart. Although he had gained a lot from this trip and was pleasantly surprised, he was also disappointed. If it were not for Supreme Wood's half-baked explanation, Yin Yang might not know how long it would take for him to figure it out on his own, based on the content that he had just read. This was not related to his intelligence, but the reasons were too unconventional. Each incident was as inconceivable as the mysterious red glow on Ji Lingxi's body, beyond his knowledge. He sighed softly and picked up Supreme Wood's letter rather reluctantly. Fiddling with it, he flipped the letter around and glanced at it. His eyes widened at once. On the back of the letter, there was a paragraph of words. I, your third brother, love exotic flowers and plants the most in my life. These 12 pots of plants in the room are all good stuff that I've scoured through half of the profound sky continent to collect. They are all rare exotic plants and at the same time, they are also treasures that are hard to come by. Consider them as a little gift from your third brother to you. So don't let me eat these 12 bonsai plants directly. If I do, it would be a reckless waste of resources. Use my art of vitality and sacred wood spell to infuse it into the plants. Within 10 days, each of the 12 plants can bear 3 fruits. Take note that each plant can only bear 3 fruits at most. If it bears more, it must be plucked at once. If there are more than 3, the medicinal effect will be weakened and it won't be good. Gather one of each of the 12 types of fruits and consume them together. It can increase the user's mystical energy by 120 years. Cough, ninth brother, you must take good care of these 12 bonsai for me. These are the 12 constellation fruit bonsai that I've collected for a long, long time. Yun Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry at the other part of Supreme Wood's third brother's letter. Why had he not realized that his third brother was so adorable in the past? It looked like he really liked these 12 bonsai very much. Between the lines, there was a hint that he was afraid that Yun Yang would take them for himself. It was conceivable that Supreme Wood had not planned to keep these 12 bonsai, but thinking that he might not be able to bring them away or for some other reason, he had left them behind. Despite knowing that he wanted to keep them, he had still instructed them earnestly, afraid that Yun Yang would mistreat his precious baby. How adorable was this? You only want the plants themselves anyway. It's too easy. I only want the fruits, I only want the fruits. Yun Yang communicated with Emmy immediately. Emmy, do you see these 12 bonsai? Emmy, whose eyes were already filled with green light, could not help but feel itchy. Aya, is this a super good item? A dream item? Yun Yang was stunned. The benefits of the plants mentioned in Supreme Wood's letter were that all 12 types of fruits had to be gathered to increase 120 years of mystical energy. Such an increase was, of course, a rare treasure to ordinary people, but to Yun Yang, it was merely the icing on the cake. After all, Yun Yang still had a boundless foundation hidden within him. It was hardly of much help, not to mention that there were so many varieties. Cultivating them was time-consuming and laborious, so the benefits would be limited in a short period of time. Aya. Aya. Emmy's soft voice was unusually excited, expressing its high opinion of the 12 pots of plants. It liked them very much and even seemed to be drooling. Chapter 737. For the past few days, the back of my head had been hurting. The pain came in waves. Every few minutes, it would hurt. A few days ago, the pain wasn't that bad, so I didn't care about it. This morning, the pain suddenly intensified. It would hurt every 4 to 5 seconds. The first time, it would hurt so much that I grimaced in pain. 2 seconds later, it would be fine again. After a few seconds, it would hurt again. It was so painful that I broke out in cold sweat. It was really excruciating. I was scared. I thought I had a serious illness. I went to the hospital with a hot towel covering my head. I looked for the doctor. After the doctor asked about it, he said one sentence with certainty. You're freezing. At that time, I was dumbfounded. It's summer. I'm sweating all over. I'm freezing. The doctor was very experienced. You turned on the air conditioner, right? I said, I swear, it was too hot the day before yesterday. I couldn't stand it, and it was only turned on for an hour. The doctor asked me, you haven't turned on the air conditioner for the past few years, right? This was the truth. It had been almost 10 years, and the heat was just like that. Other than sometimes turning on the air conditioner in winter, the air conditioner had never been turned on in summer. You're freezing from the air conditioner. The back of your head hurts so much. It's either a serious illness or a vasospasm. However, you have to be careful. If this vasospasm isn't treated properly, it might happen once every summer. In the end, it will develop into a deep-rooted migraine. Scared the hell out of me. So the main point was, take a day off today. Cough. Purple. Chapter 738. With Yun Yang's current mystical qi cultivation base, he had only spent half a day to complete the first stage of Supreme Earth's Earth Charm, despite the fact that he was cultivating multiple aspects at the same time. which was far more advanced than cultivating a single divine art. This was the benefit of having a strong foundation of mystical qi. If it had been someone else, it would have taken at least 30 to 50 years to cultivate the ground soil charm to such an extent, just like what Yun Yang had done. What was even stranger was that Yun Yang's cultivation of the earth charm felt like it was a matter of course. He did not feel like he needed to comprehend anything at all. He only needed to circulate his cultivation method once and he seemed to have entered the threshold. This was Yun Yang's first time. The moment Yun Yang's palm touched the door of Supreme Earth's room, a strange feeling rose within him. The feeling was indescribable. It was as if he had come to the end of a certain path today, at this very moment. It was unknown whether it was the earth charm's cultivation method or Yun Yang's will, but a door slowly opened amidst a thick yellow glow. It was Supreme Earth's final door. Yun Yang looked over and saw that Supreme Earth's room was obviously much bigger than the other Supreme's rooms. Right in the middle hung a large piece of writing with Supreme Earth's own name inscribed on it. For the country and the people, never cherish this body. Yun Yang stared at the words and could not help but be lost in thought. For the country and the people, never cherish this body. Indeed, Supreme Earth's entire life was a perfect representation of these words. Perhaps, he was the reflection of these words. For the country and the people, he had truly given up on everything. It was not just the throne of emperor that was within his reach. There was also the joy of having a beautiful wife and a filial son. From the moment he was about to ascend to the throne, he no longer had a noble birth, he no longer saw his young beloved son, he had built the 9 Supremes team quietly, turning from a high place that everyone looked up to a dark corner that no one knew about. For so many years, he had fought in countless battlefields and risked his life many times. It was more than 1,000 setbacks, more than a narrow escape from death. He had made great contributions, unparalleled achievements, but no one knew about them. Not a single trace of the invincible aura that was praised by all had fallen upon him. For the sake of the country and the people, there was no need to cherish this life. In the end, he realized the last 4 words. How could he cherish this body? He had lost his life on Tianxian Cliff. Even his name had never been carved on the tombstone. There was only his title, Supreme Earth. Supreme Earth. As one of the 9 Supremes, he was a hero in the hearts of Yutong's people, a noble presence. However, this hero, this greatness, had borne too much of Supreme Earth's sacrifice. Perhaps Supreme Earth could stay in the hearts of Yutong's people forever, but it was only Supreme Earth and not Yutong's eldest prince, Yuqingtian. As the most eye-catching decoration in the room, Yun Yang saw the words the moment he entered. A strange feeling welled up in his heart, as if Supreme Earth was standing there quietly, looking at him. It was also as if the crown prince of Yutong, who was clad in a bright yellow robe that could not hide his valiant and awe-inspiring aura, had ascended to the throne, overlooking the world and overlooking the mountains and rivers. Big brother. Yun Yang called out softly, his emotions abnormally agitated. On the table, the 4 treasures of the study were placed neatly. The ink had long dried and the tip of the brush had dried as well. It was like the tip of a javelin, faintly exuding a sense of sharpness. On the table, there was not only a will like the others. Instead, there were a few letters. A few letters that were neatly stacked into a stack. Yun Yang approached slowly and stretched his hand out, picking up the stack of letters in his hand. Everything he saw, the top letter read, "To the brother who enters the room." The second letter read, "This son bids farewell to father." The third letter read, "This son bids farewell to mother." The fourth letter read, "To my beloved wife." The last letter read, "Brother, give this letter to Bao when Bao is 12 years old." When he read the 4th letter, Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. Supreme Earth was obviously holding on to a sliver of hope that even if he were to die, his wife, Supreme Water, would still have a chance to survive. It was a pity that Supreme Water was destined to never see this letter. This was because she had already accompanied her beloved husband into another world. Unlike the others, Yun Yang could more or less confirm that his 3rd brother, Supreme Wood, 5th brother, Supreme Flame, and eighth brother, Supreme Wind, had escaped death at Tianxian Cliff due to their unique background. There was also his second brother, Supreme Gold, who might still have a chance to escape. However, the remaining four Supreme Earth, Supreme Water, Supreme Blood, and Supreme Thunder had most likely perished. From Supreme Wood's letter, it was known that the arrival of the 9 Supremes was a great opportunity in this world. It was a specific number that could hardly be changed by man. Even if it could be changed, it would require an almighty figure that far surpassed this world to be able to alter it, like Supreme Wood's father, an almighty figure with unfathomable abilities. However, Supreme Earth and the rest were obviously not on this list. First, it was his seventh brother, Supreme Blood. His father, Old Dugu, did not have such an ability. Otherwise, he would not have perished in Ouyang Xiaoxi's hands. Then, it was his sixth brother, Supreme Thunder, who was from the Bound of Universe. Although Lei Dongtian, who was also from the Bound of Universe, possessed extraordinary abilities, Yun Yang judged that the Bound of Universe probably did not have such an almighty figure after evaluating the abilities of both worlds. Even if there was, it would be difficult for them to be related to his sixth brother and be willing to make such a great effort. After all, his sixth brother had left the Bound of Universe because of his family, which was how the 9 Supremes had gathered. Then, it was his eldest brother, Supreme Earth, and his fourth sister, Supreme Water. Both of them were confirmed to have no backing, so there was no hope of them escaping. Cutting the queue meant that there would only be a queue when there was already a queue. It was not changing all of them. Looking at the letter that was destined to not be received, Yun Yang felt like he was choking. With a cough, he slowly sat up straight and tore open the first letter. He carefully unfolded it and took a closer look, only to see that there were lines of regular script on it. It was dignified and righteous, just like Supreme Earth's way of doing things. As the saying went, seeing the words was like seeing the person. It was not just a saying. Chapter 739. Yin Yang read on. I've often wondered which brother would open this door and see this letter if I'm no longer here one day. Selfishly, I don't want it to be Supreme Water. If it's really you, please read this letter together with the one I've pointed out to you. I'm very sorry, I've promised to accompany you for the rest of your life. I can't do it anymore. If it's any other brother other than Supreme Water, who would it be? OL, second is determined, strong, and sharp. If you read this letter, I hope that you won't be impulsive to avenge your brothers. Assist Yutong with all your might in the future. Do what we're doing well and live on our behalf. You're impulsive. If you're bent on revenge, you'll be easily found out by someone with ulterior motives. That would be terrible. Let me say this solemnly. If OL second reads this letter and you still see me as your big brother, don't seek revenge. Otherwise, I won't rest in peace and I'll never forgive you. OL third is gentle and farsighted. He rarely acts rashly. I believe you'll plan slowly and won't let the dead down. As for Supreme Water, when you read this letter, think more about our children and less about me. You've done too much for me. If you still have the strength to spare, do something for Yutong that's within your capabilities. Remember, your responsibility in the future is to watch our children grow up healthily, not to seek revenge. This is my last request in this lifetime. Sai, you've never rejected anything from me. There's no exception this time either. I'm counting on you. He had exhorted Supreme Water once, yet here he was repeating it in the same sequence. Yin Yang sighed, but his heart was filled with gratitude. His eldest brother's temper. No wonder His Majesty the Emperor was so assured in letting him build the 9 Supremes. If OL fifth sees this, don't seek revenge. You're like a raging fire, too straightforward. You're no better than OL second brother, OL sixth. If you're the one who reads this letter in the end, I hope that you can choose to bear with it and abandon your identity as one of the 9 Supremes to take on another identity to carry out the follow-up. Seventh brother, if it's God's will for you to see this letter, then it's really God's will. I only hope that you can restrain your murderous nature a little more. Discuss everything with father. Although you know how to control yourself better than second brother and fifth brother, once you're impulsive, your murderous nature is the heaviest among all the brothers. Delay urgent matters, especially when we're at a disadvantage. OL, eighth brother, supreme wind, if you read this letter. I didn't warn you too much at first, believing that the revenge of our brother's death could be expected, given your cautious nature. However, you're too carefree and don't worry about anything. Without my constant reminders and supervision, I'm afraid you won't take national affairs to heart. Sigh, at the end of the day, no matter which of the 7 brothers ends up with this letter, I can hardly be at ease. How I wish that all of you would never need to receive this letter. I really can't be at ease with each and every one of you. I feel like you're not grown up yet. I can't wait to stare at you every day until all of you can take charge on your own. If that day really comes, I, the eldest brother, will truly be able to die in peace. Why did my thoughts stray? OL, ninth couldn't help but be biased towards one and discriminate against another, mentioning everyone but not him. If it's all ninth who reads this letter in the end, then I, your eldest brother, have only one thing to say to you: think twice before you act. With you in charge, this revenge must be avenged. This grudge must be avenged. No matter what, no matter what. No matter who the enemy is, no matter how strong they are, only have one request for you: use all of your enemies' heads as a sacrifice to me. Even if I have to go against the whole world alone, this blood vengeance must be avenged. There's one more thing. Xiao Jiu, if this day really comes, even if we have to sacrifice all of our 8 brothers, we'll create a chance of survival for you. This decision of mine is also a unanimous decision made by everyone. Don't blame Big Brother for favoring one and discriminating against the other. It's not just me, all the brothers have high expectations of you. It's just that my expectations of you are the highest. Do you still remember when the 9 Supremes were cultivating the method of soul force explosion? When they were at their wits' end, they gathered the force of their souls together, gathering everyone's strength and life force to obtain a chance of survival for one of their brothers. When we gathered the 9 of us and discussed it with your second brother, third brother, fourth sister, and the others, we collectively decided that the other 8 brothers would cultivate this last step, but we didn't let OL, ninth, you, know of the existence of this method. The ultimate goal was for this last step, the last trick of survival. The reason why we didn't let you know was because we were afraid that you would be rash and immolate along with us. If that happened, our sacrifice would be worthless. Now, do you understand that my instructions this time were brief to the other brothers? Only to you, it was a long and tedious one, a great deal of effort. It's because I know that the possibility of you coming over is the highest among all of us. 9th brother, if anything happens, I'll leave the rest to you. I believe that you should already know that I'm the eldest son of Yutong's emperor by now. Yes, the current emperor, Yupeza, is my father. When I gave up the crown prince's position back then, no matter how resolute and passionate I was, I couldn't help but feel sad and lonely. After all, I'd lost the most important goal of the first half of my life and I could never get it back in this lifetime. However, the experiences that followed made me understand that nothing is more important than being truly happy. Being an emperor is to look down on the world and balance the universe, but there aren't many times when one can be happy. However, to be one of the 9 Supremes, even if it's a mountain of daggers or a sea of fire, even if it's a battlefield, every day is joyful. I'm very glad that I've made this decision. Your 4th sister, Supreme Water, is my wife. As someone who no longer has the identity of an empire's eldest son, I only have one promise to your sister-in-law: to accompany her for life. It's a pity that when you read this letter, I haven't even done this. Yutong, I'll leave it to you. The royal family, I'll leave it to you. If there are any brothers who came with you, you'll take care of them as well. My brother's funeral and families, I'll leave them all to you as well. Gratitude and grudges, I'll leave them to you as well. Bow, I'll leave them to you as well. Brother, don't think that I'm long-winded or cliché, but I still have to say that I'm very lucky to have a group of brothers like you. If there's a day when the world is at peace and Yutong is at peace, how wonderful it would be for the 9 of us to bring our families to roam the world. It's a pity that we can't do it anymore. Take care of yourself, 9th brother. If you find yourself in danger, you can give up everything else. Your survival is the first priority. What your brothers don't want the most is for something to happen to you. Take care. Brother Yuqingtian's last words. His headache eased a little. It was just as the doctor had said, this illness came and went quickly. Chapter 740. Yuqingtian. Yin Yang looked at the 3 words and felt a wave of sorrow wash over him. Eldest brother's name. Supreme Earth's name. Ever since he knew that the eldest prince was Supreme Earth, he had come to know the name Yuqingtian. However, seeing Supreme Earth call himself Yuqingtian, he still felt an endless sense of sorrow. The shock that the eldest Supreme Earth's letter had caused to Yin Yang was unprecedented. Before this, he had always thought that his escape was a last-minute decision made by his brothers. However, he had never imagined that the reason why he was able to escape with his life was not by chance, nor was it a coincidence. Instead, it was because of the escape route that his brothers had long since arranged. This meant that no matter when they encountered danger, no matter what sudden situation they faced, no matter how disadvantageous the situation was, if someone had to survive in the end, that person would definitely be him. It would not be any one of the other 8. They had long placed their only hope of survival on him. Making a decision on the spot and making a decision that had been planned for a long time were 2 completely different feelings. Yin Yang covered his face with both hands, trembling all over. Tears flowed freely through the gaps between his fingers like a fountain. Who said that a man does not shed tears easily? It was only because he had yet to be heartbroken. The 9 Supremes had been carrying out dangerous missions all year round, facing death almost all the time, walking on the edge of life and death. Even if they were imbued with unparalleled powers, how could there be no accidents? At the end of the day, the 9 Supremes were still made of flesh and blood. When they encountered danger, they would be injured and die. However, his brothers had actually made such a decision long ago. When faced with the most extreme and irreversible crisis of death, they had given up on saving themselves and tried their best to protect their youngest brother. How could such an emotion be described with words? Why are you all doing this to me? Why? Yin Yang cried out in pain. Do all of you know what it means to me to die with a smile and go to hell with a smile? In front of him, there seemed to be 8 masked men standing quietly, looking at him. Each of their gazes was filled with affection and gentle smiles. It was like a group of big brothers looking at their little brother whom they had protected with everything they had. Yin Yang sat on the chair that originally belonged to Supreme Earth, staring blankly at the pile of letters before him. His gaze was already blank, as if he could not see them. After a long time, he slumped on the seat like a pile of mud, weak as if his bones had been sucked out of him. My weakness only belongs to this moment. It will never be seen by anyone else. If my brothers' souls are not far away, do it now if you want to laugh. There won't be another chance. Yin Yang smiled, his eyes brimming with tears. After I go out this time, I'll go straight to the 4 Seasons Tower's lair and continue my long journey of martial arts. When I can reach that legendary realm one day, he gritted his teeth and said with a smile, I will find you one by one and settle this debt with you one by one. I don't care if you believe me or not, I believe in it. I have full confidence in myself. I will keep my promise. I won't be able to beat you all by then anyway. I will. Unknowingly, 8 pairs of eyes stared at him, still full of smiles, unperturbed. All right, I'm going to cultivate. Cultivating is the right thing to do now. Yin Yang murmured, don't look at me, all of you. I'm very, very uneasy now. Go, wait for me to find all of you. I must find all of you. Yin Yang shut his eyes tightly. What Yin Yang held in his hands was Supreme Earth's Earth Charm, Supreme Gold's Art of Piercing Gold, Supreme Wood's Sacred Wood Charm, and Supreme Water's Cultivation Method, all 9 cultivation methods of the 9 Supremes were finally gathered in the hands of one person for the first time. At this moment, the cultivation incantations and methods of all 9 cultivation methods were circulating in Yin Yang's mind. As of today, Yin Yang's cloud cultivation method had already been cultivated to the 6th stage. His wind and fire cultivation methods were already at the 6th stage. Thunder cultivation method was at the 5th stage, blood cultivation method was at the 4th stage, and water cultivation method was at the 5th stage. The 3 elemental cultivation methods of metal, wood, and earth were only at the 1st stage. After all, they were newly learned and their achievements were limited. Although his third brother Supreme Wood had suggested him to give up cultivating the sacred wood charm of the 9 Supremes would attribute cultivation method and switch to the more mystical art of life, Yin Yang still chose to cultivate the sacred wood charm after some consideration. After all, no matter how mystical the art of life was, it was not a cultivation method of the 9 Supremes' powers. What he needed most now was to combine the 9 Supremes into one. Now that he had all 9 cultivation methods, it meant that he could cultivate all 9 of them. However, Yin Yang did not dare to be too optimistic. After all, he had the experience of trying to cultivate wind, cloud, water, fire, thunder, and blood cultivation methods at the same time. Although his cloud form was formless, when he cultivated the mystique wind conjuration with the cloud form, there was a surge of wind and clouds, making it twice the result with half the effort. However, when he cultivated the third cultivation method at the same time, not only was the effect not good, the effect was greatly reduced. After several attempts, Yin Yang realized that although there was a certain level of improvement when he cultivated 3 or more cultivation methods, they would hinder each other due to the mutual restraints such as fire and water, blood staining the clouds, and wind and thunder being difficult to merge. It was not as fast as cultivating one. Because of this, the progress of the 6 cultivation methods was uneven. Although he had obtained all the cultivation methods of the 9 Supremes, Yin Yang still dared not cultivate all 9 of them at the same time. He tried it out with the sacred wood charm, which was the most amiable form. Just as he raised his chi and circulated it slightly, he was shocked to realize that the 9 mystical powers in his meridians were circulating at an unusually high speed. Whether it was the cloud form that had reached an extremely high level of cultivation base or the earth charm that he had just learned, the 9 cultivation methods were circulating at lightning speed. The cultivation methods of any cultivator, be it the 8 extraordinary meridians, the 12 standard meridians, or even the 3 meridians and 7 chakras. There were many different types of cultivation methods, each with their own unique principles. When a person cultivated 2 or more cultivation methods, there was a high chance that the 2 cultivation routes would overlap or even clash. Therefore, unless it was a very special cultivation method, it was difficult to cultivate 2 or more cultivation methods at the same time and still be able to advance smoothly. This was the reason why Yin Yang's progress when he cultivated multiple cultivation methods at the same time was extremely slow, a far cry from cultivating them separately. As for Yin Yang mastering 9 cultivation methods at the same time, it meant that he had to circulate 9 cultivation routes. Logically speaking, it was impossible to cultivate them at the same time. If he were to force himself to do so, not only would he only achieve half the result with twice the effort, it would be futile and he might even suffer a backlash that would severely injure him. However, when the 9 forces that were not intentionally guided gathered together, they were like 9 brothers of the same origin. As long as one of them moved, the others would move and dance with it. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.